I think we're all set here. Let me make sure we're live. And we should be good. Awesome. So I'm here with Dr. Jared Ball, and I will be calling him Dr. Jared Ball throughout this entire video. So Dr. Jared Ball is a professor of communications and Africana studies at Morgan State University, the author of The Myth of Propaganda of Black Buying Power. The second edition has just come out, so please check that out. He is the professor of petty, and I'm so honored to have him. Dr. Jared Ball, thank you for doing this for me. I really, really appreciate your time.
No, it's a pleasure. I'm as good as could be expected, and happy to be here. I appreciate the invitation. Yeah.
You have a busy morning/afternoon. I was just checking out the Morning Remix show where he gave the best endorsement. He said, if you got nothing better to do.
But again, that was because of me, not because of the show. And I've become, I'm catching up to your content and loving it. So I think what you're doing is really important. I think the perspective you're bringing to the space is important. So that's really all I meant. I just meant it is because it is off. I feel, on the one hand, I have my own ego and whatever, and I'm not ashamed of what I do, but on the other hand, self-promotion is not that easy. So, but if I'm going to appear on someone else's show, I should at least let folks know that that's happening. So that's what I meant. Like, if you hadn't had enough of me already.
Right. And I feel that like I'm still awkward with it because I'm gonna be honest, I do feel a little bit like embarrassed and shamed of doing this because one, I'm naturally a loudmouth. So if there was growing up, I was always speaking out of turn and getting myself into hot water. But I also feel that, I don't know, like I should be, I was part of a small organization. We kind of disbanded and I'm kind of like looking for a new org to join. But at the same time, this is kind of picking up. I'm like, I don't want to be that person that just stays online, so I try to volunteer. I'm working with my union. I'm very lucky to be part of that union. Right now, we're pushing back against Delta and some of the hotel companies who are trying to prevent tourist workers out here in LA from getting a raise that, we fought for almost 2 years to push through. So little things like that, I'm active, but it's not enough and it's never enough. And maybe that's like kind of like the immigrant mentality that was pushed on me, where it's like, you got to work harder, you got to do more. But at the same time, thank you for your comments. And, even speaking with FD, it's like, there's not a lot of brown, Latin voices, Hispanic, whatever you want to call us, mestizo. I prefer bastards of colonization. But so now I'm kind of put in this position where like, all right, like, let's get to it. Let's put some work in and try to at least combat, the anti-Blackness in the brown community. I was trying to drop a video yesterday, didn't work out. So I'll have to redo
on that topic.
Specifically, it was called ICE protests and anti-Blackness, and it was going to be on what I've been like coining like the K-Hive kind of like vengeance. It's a psyop to depoliticize the Black community and create a bigger wedge between the brown and Black community. But, and this might be my most reactionary position, I am very much of, take care of your home first before you can point fingers. The reason why this is able to be weaponized to such an extent is because we've neglected addressing anti-Blackness in the brown community. So of course it was going to be weaponized. Of course it was going to be used, to further divide, because we're creating that divide by not addressing anti-Blackness. So it was going to be a whole video on that. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, it just wasn't uploading right. So I'll be redoing the whole thing and dropping it on Monday. I told you I was nervous. I don't talk this much.
No, I thought I look forward to that. I think it's definitely something that needs it's a topic that needs some more critical thought on it, because the so much of the discussion that permeates these spaces, even where it's based in some reality, is a mess. I mean, so
yeah, for me, and I'm going to talk, in detail in the video about it. It is counterinsurgency, right, to create that divide, but at the same time, it's the brown community handing, you know, the white supremacists, the black misleadership class, the weapon to use
Mhm.
against us, which is it's unfortunately very real. And I know that, one of my favorite moments from now Black Liberation Media. I don't know what the situation. I know that she stopped streaming, but she was Afro Latina, and one of my favorite moments was like the whole crew starts talking in Spanish, and she's just kind of like there, just like rolling her eyes because I'm sure that she's kind of dealt with that before on both ends. I don't know if you remember, but there's a young
Wait,
lady
no, this was
back in
on.
the Black Power days.
No, I don't remember this.
Yeah, after the fallout, she stopped streaming, but I really always enjoyed her perspective. I think she was the only Afro Latina member of like the original uh, Black Power Media
But I don't
streaming.
remember. You talking? Yeah, you talking about Coco? And
Yeah, yeah.
and but I don't remember the moment you're talking about
Oh,
though.
it was awesome. I even Burn It Down Kim Brown was there. So I was dying because I was like hearing everyone speak Spanish was uh, a great
Oh,
moment.
that must have been. It must have been.
Oh, you guys were having a good time.
Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah.
But she was just kind of put in this hilarious situation, like, here we go again, like, I gotta hear it. But I hope it's all good there.
Mm.
You know, one.
Mm,
Oh, okay, okay, yeah.
yeah.
Let's move on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so thank you for this. The main reason that I reached out, you were honestly always like my first like draft pick to have a guest on. I just wanted to kind of grow the channel more before asking for your time. And my conversation with FD just kind of helped advance that further.
It was a good
But
discussion.
oh, I think I appreciate that. It was out of nowhere, so um, yeah, it was interesting, and I'm glad that I didn't act a fool like that because I can, I can. Um, but and I would like to say a lot of that mindset came from you know earn your liberation, which rest in peace,
Yeah.
through that whole thing. Which, by the way, man, that show was perfect, and even in its chaos, I know. I'm telling you, as a fan, like
No,
I
I'm a fan. I missed the show. I'm not gonna
yeah,
front. I missed the show. I'm disappointed how things have all worked out, and um, yeah.
yeah,
But
yeah, I know. I know. I just poor, like not poor Geechee, but I'm like, he was like like the middle child trying to hold the chaos together. So all credit to him. Okay, I'm just gonna start fanning out. So let's move forward. But Geechee's so amazing. Whenever, and we talked about this offline, but whenever I'm a little ageist only because at least in the brown community, like most of our older folks are kind of the thing holding us back, with a lot of regressive reactionary positions. I'm sure that's in most communities. So I've always had like I don't really look up to older people like that. But
mhm.
Geechee, I think he might be a little bit older than me, but close enough to where I'm like, all right, like there's a reachable goal, that I look at, and all his work is truly inspiring, and I'm downplaying I'm downplaying it, but he's amazing. So I'm glad that he
No,
stuck
he's a
around.
good dude, and I think you know as is Diallo. I don't think like I don't have the relationship, so to speak, didn't work out. But but for me, it's kind of like one of those breakups where there's no animosity, there's no
Mhm.
hostility. It just wasn't for whatever. And I actually I mean, there's just a lot more that I just it's not appropriate to share here.
Right.
But I think it has as much to do. like with a lot of things with forces outside of the 3-person dynamic than anything else.
Mm.
But I agree with folks that missed the show, because I think even where there's disagreement, one, and this is what I've liked about your content so far, is that I think on the one hand, there have to be some bright lines drawn and positions taken, and there has to be some disagreement. I just don't think, in certain cases at least, it needs to descend into complete
Mm.
dissolution and hostility. We're just going to disagree, and for the most part, I liked how we could have even arguments on air, and then talk a minute or two after the show and be good, and come back next week and be back, and and mostly because what we represented with the three of us is were is reflected in the community. I mean, we were all taking positions that we've all heard people in our various spaces take. So I thought it worked well to see, well, here's a space where within the context of a certain analysis and behavior, we can see these disagreements play out and be dealt with in ways that could be modeled offline. And for a while, I thought we did a really good job.
Honestly, that was my favorite part of it, because, and I tell people this all the time, they're like, what organization should I join? Which is wild to me that I'm getting asked this question already. And my thing is, like, it almost doesn't matter, because nobody's going to fill your perfect criteria unless you start your,
Yeah.
which we'll get into it, your own party. But you're going to learn to work with people that you don't 100% align with. And that's where the most beneficial aspect of organizing comes from at this point, I think, is working with others, because we're so isolated. Even with the union work that I do, there might be people I bump heads with, people who I'm a blue collar worker. Some people are very reactionary. So, but we're kind of working together to, push for better labor rights, better payment, what have you, which is not radical in any regard. And that's why I get so frustrated when people are like, "You're not practical enough." I'm like, "No, I'm this radical because I'm doing the practical work." And like, this is what's fueling the radicalization. But seeing those arguments, one, they were hilarious. Two, the often talking past each other is so relatable. And so, and yeah, like you said, like the next week was like, "Oh, we're back at it." Like, and that's beautiful to see. And again, we'll move on, but like, as a huge fan uh of what it was, it was great to see. And I guess great things come to an end, but it does make me feel like, man, I wish like somebody would have picked it up, so you guys were contractually obligated to to
That's
continue.
funny.
But that's just a
That's
selfish
funny.
consumer part of me.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
could see that. I could see that, and maybe that would have, in the ways of contradiction, would have helped us get past whatever the issues. If we
Right.
had been forced to work through it.
What is the
Yeah.
and correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't there like a Jewish saying where um basically like what is it? We're basically like, I don't think the word is goyim. It's another word um where you're not Jewish. Like, they say fuck it and we say fuck it, let's make it
What
work.
a goyim is the non-Jew.
Right, but there's another one that's less
Gentiles.
yes, the Gentile says fuck it and the Jew says fuck it, comma, let's make it work. And it's
Oh,
like uh but it's kind of like that, where it's kind of like, I wish there was. Anywho, let's move on. Let's move on.
yeah. No, but I think I get the point, but I'm
Mm,
not up on that particular
yeah.
aphorism.
So the main reason I reached out, you recently did an interview. I believe a good friend of yours. Like, it sounded like you guys went way back. Launching his new book. I should have his name. My apologies.
Oh,
Uh,
Pancho McFarlane.
Ancho.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And I had to always ask any of these like older, like Chicano, Latino, brown, specifically men. All right, what do you think about Chicanismo? What do you think about Aslan? Indigenismo? And I just I have to ask, and I literally threw my 2 cents in there to try and get a response from him. And unfortunately, I'm sure he's a great guy, and it was a good interview. Um, he kind of failed my my test in that regard,
All right.
only because Chicanismo with Aslan is a nationalist movement akin to Zionism, right? And he kind of felt a little bit like, "Whoa, that's going too far." And I'm like, "Well, it's
Yeah,
only
yeah,
going
yeah.
too far because they lack the actual material support, and the violence hasn't been enacted, or excuse me, it hasn't been enacted today, but it had been, right?" So the way I break it down is the so-called, American Southwest, everything that Mexico lost in the Mexican American War, California, Texas, Nevada, that whole region is viewed as Aslan, right? Which is the ancient ancestral homeland of the Chicanos, the Mexican Americans. And the reason why it's literally Zionism is because that region was, originally being occupied by New Spain, and they pushed mestizos into that region in order to occupy the land and combat the so-called Indio Bravos, right? The kind of restless, the uh, savage indigenous people in that region, like Comanche and other tribes there. So this idea that somehow belonged to us, when we know for a fact that there was indigenous people there that were being put in opposition with, the new mestizo, the bastards of colonization, those that lost their indigenous connection through Spanish colonization. For me, it's kind of like, how is this not a Zionism, and brown face? It makes no sense to me to try and downplay it only because it's been normalized. And to make things a little worse, there are arguments that, oh, Aslan isn't actually a physical place; it's a mental state of being. And I'm like, oh, okay, so spiritual Zionism, which will eventually lead to actually wanting, possession of the land, regardless. So that was my main kind of criticism for his kind of downplaying that is not that extreme. I'm like, it is that extreme. It's just Chicanos have not been put in the position to do anything about it. Put it that way.
So on the one hand, I would encourage you to and I'll happily help to link up with Pancho and to build at some point. I don't this is way outside my expertise. And the video you sent me, I did mean to tell you that the video you sent, that you had a like a 3-hour discussion with a couple of your comrades, and I got through like the first 90 minutes of it, and then it got removed for
Oh
some
wow.
reason.
Oh yes, I know why. Mhm.
So I didn't get to finish it, but I think it's a fascinating discussion and something that for me, and I think I'm not. I have to assume for a good number of folks, this would be a kind of a new concept and a new way of thinking about all of that. And all I remember thinking as I was listening initially, to you lay out the argument, was that I was just having a lot of visceral, unscientific reactions to it.
Mm,
But they were only based in how could you compare this to the Zionism we know of, or the idea that non-white peoples can't be categorized as doing the same thing as white people. But I think ultimately that's wrong. I think I'm just caught up in the sort of recency bias of the last 500 years of European, global ascendancy, so to speak.
yeah.
But I think fundamentally you raise a very good point, especially if you're considering it from the perspective of indigenous people who do, as you and your comrades are pointing out, often get forgotten. I think especially from outsiders and unexperts who consider Latin America.
Mm,
Um, it's hard to fathom that the brown people that many of us find ourselves in solidarity with or want to be in solidarity with can be categorized as, would you say, spiritual Zionists. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
and so I'm not saying that I disagree or that you're wrong. It's just something that uh, and I'm assuming others would need, some time to grapple with and some political education around. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that because, I described this before where to be Mexican American or Chicano, you kind of have to go through a lot of like identity deaths or whatever, however
Yeah,
you want to phrase
yeah.
it, where immediately you're not American. You're not going to be American. You're not Mexican because when you head over there, they see you a mile away. You're a pocho.
Wow,
You're gringueado, right? You're like even
wow.
Americanized. So there's no faking it over there. You're immediately spotted. And so for me, like, and a lot of people, you start embracing, this Chicano movement, you know, the brown berets, the whole,
Mm,
indigenismo, meaning like, oh, well, we have indigenous ancestry. So if you reconnect with your indigenous side, you'll find your identity. And it's like you'll never know what community you came from. It just won't happen. It's gone, and it's a very lonely feeling not to have that connection to your ancestry like that. And that's why I do like emphasize that. I jokingly say it, but I'm like, we are literally bastards of colonizations. We don't know who we belong to, who we came from. But that puts us in a position where, like, well, we have the choice is ours to either align with the colonizer, with white supremacy. Like often we try to, encroach into whiteness, or if we're actually principled and disciplined allies to indigenous and black communities. And we've, I think, failed at that for the most part, especially checking ourselves with anti-blackness and the anti-indigenous sentiment. We have so many sayings in Spanish that discriminate against indigenous people that are normalized, right? There's this one called like con el nopal en la frente, right? The cactus, the nopal, that, oh, you have it in your forehead. Like you look so
mm.
native that you
Oh,
literally have
wow.
an indigenous plant on your forehead signaling that you're indigenous, right? Too often growing up, you hear parents tell their kids, don't play in the sun. You're gonna get darker, right? Because if we stay indoors enough, we start to lighten up a little bit. But at the moment that we're out in the summer, like we change like 2 or 3.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so I understand kind of
Mm.
like wait, I thought these were allies, or I thought not perceiving us as, it's just a complicated history that needs to be addressed. And the more that we try to encroach into um, indigenous communities, the further that we help erase, their struggle and their identity. And that's the main issue. For example, the video that you were referenced was with Rick from Decolonized Buffalo. Me and him had a falling out. I mean, he blatantly smeared me over. He was doing a lecture series, and I did a lecture series on settler realism, which was a play on Mark Fisher's capitalist realism, and everything was going good. It didn't even involve me directly, but he kind of pulled me into his um, falling out that he had, and I thought he pulled me in to kind of be a mediator, to mediate between parties. So I was trying to do that, which again, like something I have to do with my union work is mediate between coworkers sometimes if there's an issue. So I was like, oh, I'm just going to use this approach. And he saw it as me trying, like, covering for excusing racism. And I'm like, wait, then why'd you pull me? Like, if you pulled me in just to fucking fight with people, excuse me, we could do that.
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
but say so. And because I'd done that, alongside him in the past, but I assume because the people involved were people that he knew, that he worked with, that he built with, that he was asking me to mediate. And it just, we had a falling out because he claimed that I was defending, first that I was excusing, then defending, and then that I wasn't against racism enough. So he kind of switched up his story. And when I asked him to, because he had a habit of leaking direct messages, I'm like, you have the screenshots, just leak the messages like you would with anyone else. I got blocked. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, so it was the whole thing. That being said, his work I still recommend to people. I still sent it your way. Whether or not I would have been involved in it, I would have sent it your way. I just felt that that was the most approachable one, because his work is, and that's what makes it hard to be a hater, with him, is, or to feel truly negative towards him outside of the personal, is that his work is amazing. And the reason that why that video got pulled down is he recently just deleted everything again. Like, he has this habit of just randomly disappearing. My only
Oh,
speculation is and we'll get into this a little bit further, is maybe something to do with his military service has that he has kind of these weird, breakouts.
He's active service. He's
He
active
was,
duty.
he was. He's a veteran with yeah, I don't want to get into his personal life, but that's my
That's fine.
speculation
That's
why
fine. Yeah, yeah.
he erased
Okay.
it. To answer your question of why it disappeared, that video.
Oh well.
But that's
Yeah,
tough.
that's unfortunate. And
Great work though. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I'm not unfamiliar with having fallouts with people whose work you still respect. So
It's
I get it.
okay. I had to get to these questions, but I had to say this. Let's see. Let me make sure it's not a question that I have on here. It isn't really, but man, I would be seated down for in class, with Dr. Carr. I would be seated down because, and you're
Yeah.
right, and he is, and I think you called it something like his ability to recall or something along those lines.
Yeah, his ability, yeah, his recall ability is unmatched.
Wow, it is scary. And he could
Yeah.
just turn around and grab a book, and it's like, oh, right here, and I'm like, yo, like, I have never felt more intellectually inferior
Yeah.
than the way that his mind works. And I say that to say that the fact that you were willing to kind of not get like talked down to or try to get like bullied, I guess, and step up to that, like credit to you because I can't imagine a more intellectually intimidating, I don't want to call him foe, but opposition.
I mean, I appreciate, on the one hand, on the one hand, kind of like you said of yourself. I mean, it is kind of my personality, and I've even to my own detriment, uh, whether it's ego or whatever, been willing to stand up to really whoever,
Mm,
even you know in real life when it's not a good idea. Um, just in terms of physical safety or tactics. But the other part of it is as formidable as Dr. Carr is. I mean, he's also somebody I've known for a long time, and this is what has kind of pissed me off about the whole thing is that it's like my man. We know each other for real. Like we used to see each other for real, and none of this would have ever happened. That's what I still to this day find to be. And when people even constantly, even right now, somebody is going to be leaving a comment on my channel saying something bad about me for criticizing him, but I promise that they don't know him as well as I do or for as long. And so I, part of it is a frustration with just kind of like who are you talking to, like like what do like, of all the people in the world to go at the way he has me. I'm like, I can't believe,
mm,
to this day I still can't, I literally cannot believe he has behaved this way. I mean, because and I've told him for years, and it's still true. I mean, going back to before I met him and was listening to him on cassettes while delivering pizza. I told him that the meeting that he moderated between John Henrik Clarke and Cornel West that I used to listen to on cassette. I told him, I said I used to mark my intellectual development
mm,
by that discussion, because when I first heard it, I didn't understand anything. I was like, even his questions, I was like, your questions, I don't understand what you're asking. And then I would always say to this day, like, I don't fully think I could give, the best answers, but at least now I understand the questions.
mm,
Um, I mean, this is somebody I met, I would literally drive almost 3 hours from my undergraduate, from Frostburg State to go sit in his class. Now, imagine being an undergrad. Think about undergraduate students. I would leave my own classes, drive 3 hours to DC and sit in his class in Howard,
wow.
and then walk with him across campus to his office to hang out for office hours. So like, And when I got on radio in DC, I used to go after, go after him for interviews all the time. Before he was so willing to be on YouTube all the time, he was not, the most easy to get to sit down. So it was like we used to see each other at Sankofa Books all the times. We've been on panels together. We've seen each other, at conferences all over the country. I mean, it's like we were, on text groups, and we would call each other from time to time. Like it's like, it's really, really weird
Mm-hmm.
that he would engage me the way he has. And then more importantly, the some of the public behavior that I think he's engaged with in terms of what should be his role as a master teacher, which he is. I just think, and then by the way, like, I mean, he and I would make fun of the Roland Martins of the world, literally, now that he's on the show, like before he was on the show. So it's like, it's really it's really bizarre.
Yeah.
And again, my only argument against him, even in our debate, was stop demeaning radical traditions. That was it. Like, you don't have to agree with them, you don't have to adopt them, but I know you know them, and I know you respect them more than you're showing here. So why? And I don't know. I'll probably go to my grave. I'll never get the answer to that. It's right. Such a bizarre turn.
And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that truly does sound heartbreaking.
It is. No, that's fair. I think it's fair. It is hurtful. It is hurtful on a personal level.
You're right.
And with him and a couple of people, I think this YouTube space I think your approach is an important one, because I think it's a corrupting space. Like, this whole thing is like, the last few years of my own becoming more of a YouTuber, I'm like, this is, the behavior is really outrageous, and something I would have, again, never experienced in the more in-person real work of organizing and other things that I used to be more involved with. Nobody would have been doing this stuff. I never had any of these conflicts in person like this. Nobody ever talked like this about people. I never saw any of it. I mean, it's
we know why.
Well, we know why, but I mean, it's just, but it is frustrating, because honestly, I mean, I was even thinking of it, I think actually probably a lot more than I'd like to admit, but I just couldn't, I would have never in a million years thought that some of the whether it's Dr. Carr or a couple of other examples, I would have never thought these things could have been possible. These well, not just disagreements. I mean, that happens all the time, but the hostility. And the gaslighting and the misrepresentation. I mean, it's really, I just never would have, I would have never thought it possible. And yet it happens. And I see it happen with other people, somewhat routinely. And it's,
well, I think you're handling it with, like, honestly, like, very respectful and with integrity. The fact that you're like, hey, you don't have to engage with me, engage with the work, like little things like that. I will have to say, you recently said something along the lines of, like, when people don't cite you, you're like, you said something like, I haven't even done anything to these people. And I want to push back on that a little bit. You have, I think, by your position and how principled you are with that position, you threaten them because it highlights how fraudulent they are, how illegitimate their position is. So you are a threat just by being you, basically.
Yeah. All right. I appreciate that. But what I mean is, of course, like, I haven't, look, and my point is, one of the reasons why I try to check myself is because I'm not some perfect superhuman. And historically, particularly as a younger man, I've made a lot of mistakes in how I engage. And I've myself been more hostile and mean than I need to be. I've been more willing to at least consider, a less principled form of engagement. And I've tried, so I'm saying this as a check of myself. So my point when I'm saying I haven't done anything to you is that, and I know you get this, it's not, but it's, I haven't committed some, I haven't called you out your name. I haven't put my hands on you. I haven't stolen from you. I haven't what we would traditionally think would get somebody so animated, or would get somebody to go against someone that was, if not a friend, at least a comrade, or someone you've had some principled history with. I would expect, like, how did we get here? I mean, if if I've held to these important patterns of behavior, how is it that this, or whatever you're claiming, could get, but no, but I get your point, and I mean, yeah, I don't know.
No, I thank you for that. And these are kind of things. This is why I said I was a little nervous to interview you, because I've been following your work for so long that I'm like, oh, I have so many questions, like on the kind of seeing how you handle these kind of fallouts, or even Two Blacks crew with the Black Myths podcast, how they were willing to criticize the project, like things like that, and seeing you handle that when you could have very easily been like, you know what, I'm out, this isn't worth it. I mix what I like, that's what I'm going to focus on. To me, that is kind of like the most encouraging aspect of it all, is the fact of like the growing pains, and the constant willingness to accept criticism and develop, while remaining principled throughout it. For me, like thank you for providing that example, is what I'm trying to say. But yeah.
I I appreciate it. I mean, I don't, oh man, there's look, I will say this. I don't know. My initial thought is, I don't know that I've handled some of the criticism as well as I would like.
Mm,
Um, the other thing is, I don't know. I haven't figured out the way around what I think is a massive problem, which is that when you express disagreement, it doesn't lead to principled discussion. It leads to being cut off from the in crowd.
mm,
Uh, so yeah, I admit I struggled with trying to walk to to find the right balance. Uh, um, and then, to what extent do you accept certain forms of criticism that aren't warranted, but then don't respond because you don't want to be? I'll say, I don't want to be cut off any more than I am, or I don't want to engage in some sort of unprincipled. I don't know. It's a struggle to figure out the right way to do it, and so I appreciate that you've, or anyone might find some value in what they've seen me expressing. But I admit it. I'm struggling to do it, but I'm trying to find a way to say that I don't always think I get it 100% correct, and then I do think there is a broader problem of that I am trying to demonstrate a way of engage, to demonstrate a model, to model. This is the word I'm looking for,
mhm.
where some criticism can be offered, and it doesn't lead to somebody just saying, well, I'm cutting you off, I'm leaving, I'm not inviting you anymore, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. Because that does happen in these spaces too much. But it's like,
Yeah.
if you say, I disagree with that, then all of a sudden you stop getting the emails, and you stop getting and it's like, well, what happened to our, what happened to not being liberal and combating liberalism and accepting criticism and all of that? It doesn't really. So I'm trying. So all that to say, as I am trying, and I appreciate, you know,
No, for sure.
you know,
All right. That's me fanning out for like 43 minutes.
right.
45, my
Yeah.
apologies. I just had to. Okay. One of the main things I want to talk to you about was this whole concept of the after party that you pitched around. I was recently listening to your Green Party speech. I know that you were like a candidate as well. You were one of the few people that would like actually platform PSL's Claudia de la Cruz. Um, can we dive into your background with the Green Party? your current relationship with it, the kind of who do we turn to in terms of the vanguard party if we have one, all right? And you've been playing around a lot with this idea that I really want to see it become material, the after party. So if you could walk us through this.
Sure. The short version is that I only considered electoral politics for the first time with any seriousness in the early 2000s after almost 20 years. You know, I voted for Clinton in 92 when I was in the Navy. It was my first vote. You know, and I was like, okay, this was a setup. And it was like, I'm not doing this ever again. And but for the most part, with a couple of exceptions here or there, I didn't vote. I just didn't vote. I was like, I'm a revolutionary. I'm not, you know, I just had that whole approach. But living in DC again in the early 2000s and being introduced to a lot of different activist and organizational efforts in that city at the time, I shout out to the late Rick Tingling Clemens, who kind of brought me into the what was at the time the DC Statehood Green Party, which was a combination of efforts that you know sought to have what was at the time a mostly Black DC become a state and benefit, relatively speaking, you know, as such. And it merged with the Green Party. So I kind of liked that. And I, you know, so that was really how I became part of the Green Party. And then, you know, at one point, a couple people asked me, well, really, they were asking my homeboy Head Rock to run in 08, and he didn't want to do it. So, you know, I was foolish enough to step up. But I'm glad for that experience. So, but but really my point was always and is still, I don't like you know, I don't really have, I'm not a fan of voting. I'm not a fan of the electoral process. I'm not a fan of a lot of the discussion around it. And I'm not thrilled with the potential for it to be as helpful as we would like, or people sometimes pretend it can be. But at the same time, I've found it difficult to find certain ways of an appropriate way to engage people in radical spaces or not around elections at the time of the elections. So it was always like you know presidential elections primarily, but others sometimes just take up so much space. Either we're listening to the discussions, we're criticizing the discussions, we're saying why we shouldn't vote, we're saying why we should vote this way. And it's always, we're following some way around. So even from those, even when I was thinking of myself as this true revolutionary who doesn't want to engage at all, like there was still I didn't see any sort of organized conscious effort around how we engage people around electoral politics or what we should do. And then I also increasingly, I have no proof of this, but increasingly, I think a lot more people who claim that they don't vote or they were too revolutionary for it, I think they slip off and end up voting for some Democrat. I do.
Right.
I think they do. I think they fall for it. And then so often I would find that people in what were supposed to be radical spaces kept saying, well, this is why we have to vote for the Democrat. And I'm like, so even if that's your conclusion, the discussion that leads us or you to that spot is so bad and boring. And you know, so, you know, whether it's, you know, going back and reviewing Malcolm X or other people, it's like, or even the Panther Party, I at least began to appreciate that they at least evolved some, okay, look, a lot of our people are going to vote. A lot of our people are going to be caught up in discussions about voting. So we at least have to have a better analysis. And then what really pushed me over the edge in terms of this after party idea is when we were working on the Alive Reinvention book, the critique of Manning Marable's book on Malcolm X, where that book completely distorts Malcolm's discussion of a number of things, but particularly around voting and the organization of Afro-American unity. It completely erases and reframes what Malcolm was saying to make it seem like he would have been supporting Obama and some other Democrats. So when I read what the OAAU, when I reread it again with a different focus, I was saying it became kind of clear to me, and that's why I started calling myself a Malcolm X voter. Because he was at least saying, look, we have to have Black communities need to be producing their candidates. Black communities need to be producing the parties or the engagement with the parties and the platforms and the ideas, and then engaging this process. And I was like, that's okay. That works for me. That way we can, you can't just, and for a while it was big for me to say, I've done everything this country tells you you're supposed to do. I've gotten these degrees. I've gotten the doctorate. I got an Ivy League degree. I went into the military. I ran for office. I vote in the local elections. I got a little, picket fence in the house, and I have 2 children and a wife and a dog. I did all of these things, and we're still not free.
Yeah. Wow.
So I was like, so I said, like, now that I've checked off all the boxes that you told me to, now can we have this revolution? Like, and so the same kind of thing with the vote, like, I don't want, and I wanted to be able to admit to your point about being petty and a hater. I did want to be able to have something when people say, well, if you don't vote, then you complain. And our ancestors died for us the right to vote. And I wanted to have something to say to that. I said, fine, yeah, I did vote. And I voted for this candidate in this party. And I'm helping produce this candidate and this party and these platforms. And why did you vote for that party and platform? What did you think you were going to get? Because this is why I voted for this. I voted for Claudia or whoever, because this. Are you going to get any of that with that vote? Oh, then. So that was really my whole thing. So then I just, and as we started engaging more of these spaces, I was saying, like, why don't we evolve an electoral strategy with that same kind of idea? Like, I get it. We're all revolutionaries. We don't think it's anything. Yeah. But at the same time, whether it's students in my classroom, whether it's our family, whether it's our coworker, somebody around us is not going to be on our page, and they're going to be, walking off to blindly to support a Democrat, or a couple of times worse, and then we certainly get nowhere. So anyway, that was why I wanted to, I got into this after party idea and then kind of had fun with it. The after party is always better than, at least theoretically, you always want to go to the next level. It's just like, so let's have some fun with it and try to raise some of these questions, raise some of these criticisms about how we engage. So yeah, that's, I'll stop there. I don't want to just, keep going.
No, thank you. Thank you for that. Have you, especially now with like Renee, Saturdays with Renee is always like so educational. I think the last one I saw was the one on tech, and that was so frightening, especially because I'm really bad with names, so my apologies.
Dwayne Monroe.
Dwayne Monroe has a voice that is so chilling.
Yeah.
When explaining how we're screwed, it's like, yo, bro, like, oh, like,
because you would think that with the news he's giving you, it would sound like, but it sounds like, hey,
right. It's like instead of
you're in
getting
real
Alex
trouble,
Jones,
buddy.
yeah, instead of getting Alex Jones telling us the world's gonna end, we're getting like NPR, like,
like, exactly, like a black NPR. Hey, everybody, it's 2:00 on a Wednesday, and your life's about to end.
Yeah, exactly.
AI is about to drive your car into a traffic light, to a wall.
Look, if AI is smart, like he claims to be, it would adopt his voice when it finally takes over, Yeah, but please, everybody, check out Saturdays with me. I mean, if you're here, you are already, but just in case. So have you taken any steps to make this real, like the after party? Because even the name, the after party, is so good.
No, I can't say that. I honestly, I can't say that I have. And admittedly, part of it is my own levels of discipline, and the development of a party is very difficult. So what I've just wanted to do is hopefully help the idea proliferate, and as I think a lot of us hope that someone else would pick it up. But I honestly, Yeah, I would like to think more about it, and maybe take it more seriously in terms of doing what you would need to do. But in some ways, I've also thought of it in terms of like the same way I think of the Vernon philosophy argument that I've tried to work with. This it's like an immaterial intellectual boycott of media
Mm,
as opposed to a real one. And in some ways, I think I might have coaxed myself into thinking of the after party the same way, that whether, because part of it is true, like whether you want to do it within the Green Party or the PSL, or I guess even theoretically the Democrats, the idea would be that you're already a pre-organized block. So in some ways, it's not even that new of an idea. It's just saying, again, like what Malcolm was saying 60 years ago, or what Kwame Ture used to say about armed struggle. Like we all know the police are going to kill somebody in the neighborhood, and a few of you are going to do some things like throw bricks or whatever. So you might as well organize that in advance,
hmm
and then whatever you end up doing will be much more impactful. I'm trying to say the same thing with voting. A number of you are going to run off and vote for Democrats. A few of you maybe do something even worse, and a whole bunch of us are not going to vote at all.
hmm
Why don't we just organize this into some sort of effort that, regardless of whether it's the vote itself, because this is another thing, kind of like what August Nimps has been saying that I've been new to, this idea that you don't you don't engage in elections necessarily to win. It's supposed to help you map out the strength of your pending revolution. And then his
Mm,
argument is that if you do it right, you even know the exact day and time when the revolution would
wow.
happen, because you would have counted the people who are on board. So it's like a way of, and I have thought of it in a similar way of saying, are you really a revolutionary who wants to do all these other things if you won't even organize with me to cast a vote in a certain way? Like I'm really only kind of saying, like, if we're gonna do all the, as I saw in that conversation you all were having, if we're gonna do all the Frantz Fanonian things at some point, don't we have to have some kind of basic ability to trust one another to do the safest, simplest, still legal shit? Like, I mean, it's the vote is such a, it's like we can actually talk about this.
Right,
We
right,
can
right.
legally come on YouTube and say, I just want you to vote over here.
Yeah.
And then all these, a lot of people will tough talk about how soft that is, but it's like, don't you see what has to happen?
hmm
Because you want me to do X, Y, and Z, but I can't even trust that you're going to do this. Or you
Right.
want me to be here at 3 o'clock so that this can happen, you know, but I have no faith that you're going to be ready at 3 o'clock. And
hmm
I'm just going to be standing there, you know,
Yeah,
you know.
I hear that.
So that's really the way I'm thinking of it. Like, if how difficult is it to say, look, I'm not voting for, but I get it. The propaganda is strong, the
Right.
messaging is strong, and all that. But theoretically, at the point where people are expressing that they are revolutionaries or at least radicals, I would think it should get to the point where it's kind of easy to say, well, let's just, how are you going to vote? Well, I'm going to vote. Let's do the same thing. Let's determine, as Glenn Ford used to say, the bright line categories.
S- Yeah, one of the things I've noticed with a lot of these, they call themselves sock dimps. They used to call themselves progressives. I mean, for me, it's just they always change up the word. They always adopt a new word in order to paint themselves as something other than aligning with the status quo. Basically, one of the big things is I think, I don't know if Noam Chomsky said this or a lot of the people using him as an excuse were saying it. Oh, voting's like washing your hands. Like, don't overthink it. Just do it and go about your day. And I'm like, kind of referencing to what you're saying is, if you're trying to diminish voting for the Democratic Party by saying it's just like washing your hands, well, then why not vote for a party that you're actually aligned with, or at the very least doesn't actively carry out genocide? And for me, that's when you mentioned like my hatred for liberals, and it's because they're so smug and self-righteous while being some of the most vile creatures. How is it that genocide is not a red line for you, right? So, oh, because fascism is going to come home, Like, so you're willing to normalize genocide just so that your ass potentially can be saved just for a little bit longer, if we're being honest, right? And with that time frame, you're not going to use it to organize, as you mentioned, any kind of revolutionary action or anything to even challenge the Democratic Party, much less revolutionary action. Like, not even to challenge the Democratic Party. How is it that some of the largest white platforms on the so-called online left are over here advocating for Kamala Harris, are again feigning to find genocide abhorrent, but yet excusing voting for the party that is committing it? Right? This should have been the death of the Democratic Party for the so-called left.
Look, that was the one so-called concession in 2008 that I was willing to listen to. When I was, whether I was running or supporting Cynthia and Rosa for the Green Party at the time, the argument was, look, for a lot of people, they were like, look, I'm not voting for Obama. There's no way I'm not going to vote for Obama. So my argument was, okay, fine. Then promise me this: after you vote for him at least once and then probably twice, then promise me over the next 8 years, you will at least work to help build the alternatives. If you host a show or you listen to a show, as I think, your exchange with Sam Cedar and them was, I think, I hate to admit how much I enjoyed it. Like, it should be taken more seriously, but I just couldn't stop laughing. And I've watched it, I think at least twice now.
Thank you.
Because I think but I'm just saying, so like, if you listen to Sam Cedar, then call him up over the next 8 years and say, yo, can you interview somebody who's building the Green Party? Can you interview somebody who's left of the mainstream Dems? Can we start to, okay, I get it. You're going to vote. And then the same thing with Bernie. I get it. You're going to vote for Bernie. Vote for Bernie. Fine. Then just say, over the next 4 years, will you promise me that if you host a podcast, you'll interview PSL, Green Party, Ujima People's Party? I mean, anybody, interview the non-voters, let's start to build it so that when we're, so in 4 to 8 years, you're not telling me again, Jared, come on, this time around, Jared, we got to, we got to suck it up and vote for the lesser of evils this time, which, by the way, is what they were saying literally in 1992. I mean, it's like, if you pay attention, it's like, how can you be my age and not be fooled by this at this point, and still be fooled by this at this point? They've been literally saying the same thing this election. He's on trial now, and everybody forgets that Diddy was doing the vote or die. This is the most important 2004. You vote or die, everybody. If it's like, okay. Anyway, so when are we gonna talk about some alternatives and building some alternatives, so that you stop telling me how immature I am every election? So yeah, I forgot exactly where we're going, but
No.
yeah.
That was the other thing. I know that we're both very kind of scatterbrained, so I'm like, okay, I need to focus in. That's my role, which I hate doing because I just like chopping it up like this. Have you seen? I think it's like 12 years old now. Glenn Ford's conversation with Sam Cedar.
No. So did you mention it? So, and this is upsetting to me because, for a time, Glenn and I are very close. I was working with Black Agenda from the beginning.
Sorry to interrupt you. Your what's the word I'm looking for? But when you made that eulogy, I guess would be accurate. I'm a crybaby in general, but like, man, that made me tear up.
It made me tear up. I had to get off camera because I'm still of a certain retrograde manhood generational, like I'm not tearing up on camera. It's not happening. It's not happening. And I'm not proud of that. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying it's just not happening. I'm not that advanced. So I was, look, man, Glenn, I got my own issues, with father figures and all that stuff, I need therapy, all that kind of stuff. But Glenn was my guy, man. Me, and I was very close with him for a long time. And to your point, even where we had our issue, it was never about his analysis or his work. He was phenomenal, and I I'm it's frustrating to me that he's not only not that he's not here, but that a lot of people that I don't think are justified like to claim his mantle at this point. I'll say it that they like the claim an association that I think is unfair or unwarranted. But yeah, he was so. But I missed this. So my point is, I never saw. I don't know how I never saw it, but I
Yeah.
did not see it.
Let me see if I don't
I don't
accidentally.
see anything on
Oh no,
screen. I don't
yeah.
know if you
Let
meant to
me
be
pull it up
showing
here.
something. No.
This is it right here. Let's see if it's popping up. Uh,
Oh wow.
is it popping up? Yep.
I see something there. Yeah, Glenn Ford, a more effective evil. Yeah, 12 years. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, it wasn't popping up. It's not popping up on my side for whatever reason. Oh well, there it is.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Awesome. I have listened to this so many times, and for me, it just highlights the fact that Sam Cedar is, for all intents purposes, much like Bernie Sanders, a DNC
Oh,
shit.
definitely.
100%. When somebody like Len Ford breaks it down like this to this extent, and I recommend everybody please go check it out. You're going to be giving views to the majority report, but it is what it is. And it's a must watch. It's chilling how relevant it still is today. Um, but the parallels with that and kind of the what I've seen as kind of, yeah, like the vengeance of not having, the black bourgeois not having Kamala Harris as their, as their figurehead. That's what I'm seeing a lot of this whole, oh, black people mind your own business, stay home. Oh, what happened to Latinos for Trump? While people that literally cannot vote are being kidnapped. And don't get me wrong, when I found out that I forgot her name, but the one that was singing the Cuban that was singing "Let's Go Donald Trump" or whatever that little jingle
Oh
was.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, like
yeah.
when her husband's gonna get deported. I laughed 100%. Absolutely. I do think that to that extent we should be mocking those people. However, predominantly the people that are getting kidnapped right now by the state
Had nothing to do with it.
are apolitical. Most of them are working 14-hour days.
Yeah.
They're coming home to eat and knock out. I've seen this in my family. Like stop. Like these are people that literally don't have the time of day to get involved because they're stuck in traffic to hit the next job site, or they're posted up waiting to get picked up to go to a job site in hopes of that. Rain or shine, whatever. Like they're out there. I've seen it. I'm first generation. Anywho, the one thing that I want to talk about with uh bringing up Glenn Ford is this whole concept of the more effective or efficient evil, right? A lot of people were already applauding, like, or imagining that somehow Kamala Harris would have avoided this conflict with Iran, would have ended the genocide in Israel when she's repeatedly said otherwise through her own words and her own team. And now, kind of connecting it with the whole thing that broke out with Beyonce and the Buffalo Soldiers, I'm seeing this like growing, evolving. I don't know. I don't even know whether you align it with ADOS, with or um, these kind of more black patriotic movements, because I don't want to call it black nationalism and confuse it. But
Right, right,
uh,
right.
where do you think this is going, and how is there a way to combat this? Right, not me, not the brown community, but it's interesting seeing the vocalization of the xenophobia, the anti-immigrant, um, you know, patriotism somehow.
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what exactly is the best way to address it. I always liked and have tried to adopt in my own way Glenn's approach, which was uh, to produce work not for the masses, but for the people who are in organizing spaces
Mhm.
to inform and inspire them and help them grow. And I think that's how I like to think of the work that I'm doing. So that's why I don't ever think of um trying to your point with FD, reach a certain audience level and all of that kind of work, because then you're not you're not talking to people who are going to be moving in that direction, so to speak. I also think that ADOS and FBA and all that are just taking advantage of an old set of problems that are being increasingly weaponized in this new media, technological, political landscape and moment. So they're definitely not helping, and I'm, without having any evidence, even algorithmically, they're situated to take off and reach a certain audience with just those kind of politics. So so I don't know, other than I mean, we're in a precarious moment. I don't know, other than doing the work that you're doing, the work I and others are trying to do, and then the actual people building organized efforts on the ground, and trying to keep a certain analytical frame alive. That's the only. I don't know. I really, I don't have a good answer or a good response to that. And I think that I don't know. In some ways, I hate to say, I think things are going to get a little bit worse before we catch up and get the problem more or less corrected. I also don't know. I mean, I think I do think of it similar to what I'm saying about voting. I think there needs to be some big, loud, overt, legal, maybe even initially not, incredibly radical political formation that is just. That's why I was trying to think of the vote. If we could just get people to act in accordance on something this simple, it would do something to bring people back from the brink of, we all have to be pitted against one another because we all have our favorite YouTube channels and platforms and podcasts telling us this, and it's the only way that that we can protect ourselves from the ravages of the propaganda, the psychological warfare, the various forms of the counterinsurgent efforts that are looking to keep all of this separate and in this way. But we're we're not going to capture the dominant narrative in advance of some sort of organized effort and movement. So the dominant narrative is always going to have some sort of anti unification, radical worker, type of politics to it that we are going to have to find, ways around. I hate my answers to those questions. I really don't. I really do struggle with how best to respond to these kinds of problems right now.
And I know it might seem to the audience that I'm kind of stepping out of my lane a little bit with that question, but the main reason that I ask is because it's almost inherent in the brown community to be patriotic, and that's mainly because, and I went through this knowing how my family that didn't make it across, how they were living. You become so grateful for this country, and I always loved history, so I was reading everything that they were feeding me. So I was like hyper consuming the indoctrination. And, the rest of my family would crack jokes about me being so patriotic and stuff like that. And I even remember as like a kid in middle school, I was like, oh, like, shoot, I might want to be like a U.S. Marshal, like a U.S. Air Marshal or something like that. Like, that's where my mind was. So it was kind of surprising in a lot of ways that it took kind of this long, or I guess it took Obama really for the black community to kind of start adopting or start seeing the growth of this kind of patriotism. Because in the brown community, we might be waving our Mexican flags or flag from Central or South America, but it's one of the most like patriotic communities that you could find. I think recently there was this father who was physically assaulted by ICE and then kidnapped. And the news, even on Democracy Now, kept highlighting the fact that, well, 3 of his sons are Marines. And I'm
Mm.
like, there's been Marines that have been deported and stand in La Linea and the border crossing with the U.S. flag to accept donations for their legal fees or whatever to try and get back. And for me, it's kind of like that's how embedded that patriotism is in the brown community. Or
Well, I think it's that way for one of my favorite references is when John Oliver Killens wrote 70, 50, 60 years, whatever it was. His whole point was, his argument was in terms of black and white and black people. What will always be the dividing line is that for white people, this country meant their freedom, and for black people, it meant their enslavement. And I think there's a parallel, obviously, to the immigrant community, wherever in the world they're coming from. So much of the mythology. I mean, I remember him being in Tanzania years ago, and this little boy who already spoke like 10 languages, so he's clearly smart. He said he heard I was from DC, and he literally thought the streets were paved with gold. I'll never forget. He was like, "You're from DC." It's like Washington, D. And of course, the joke for anybody who's been to DC, where the streets are not only not paved with gold, they're barely paved at all. It's like pothole city. It's like, wow, this is serious. So a lot of people, I married into a Latin American family, and there's a lot of that there too. It's a lot of, look at where my cousins live in Panama. Look at how they look at how so and so lives. This is a come up. Everything here is a come up, and it can not only create these delusions, but it pits people against it. It starts to pit communities against one another, and then you start adding to the encouraged mythology that attends the fact that most so-called legal migrants to this country come from a socioeconomic background better than the average Black American. So you have this class issue that comes into it. So then and then of course all of the messaging is, don't connect yourself with any of the groups that would be seen as threatening. So then everybody, I remember in grad school, it's definitely anecdotal, but we used to joke all the time, like the continental Africans in grad school were getting pun intent. Well, let me stay appropriate. They were being, the joke was that so many of them were being cajoled by the mythology of this country. And then because their sponsors and the university itself that was inviting them were often affluent whites, it would create the situation where affluent whites, who themselves don't want to hang out with Black Americans, are happy to have their continental, buddies and sponsees, hear that version and get that you don't want to be hanging out over there, like, so we have all of these inducements. And then of course within the Black community here or any other community, you have the invitations not only to various forms of whiteness, but to bougie, always pulling to keep people unified and looking critically and unanalytically or non-analytically at other people as being part of the problem that they're struggling against. I also think of, my own military experience. I met, most of the people I worked with were well, everybody was poor, but it was, a lot of people from the Latin American community, a lot of Filipinos, and a lot of folk, so and folks that many of us wouldn't commonly come in contact with. They're all there serving at the lowest rungs of the Navy, and often adopting some of that mythology. Like, this is my come up. This is, this is this country's opportunity. This is, I wouldn't have this opportunity without this. So then when you start to introduce or raise critical questions about this country, the initial reaction is, I'm not trying to hear that. I'm not. So again, I don't know. I think I lost the plot again on your point, but it's just wild and frustrating. the propaganda also, like every time, and I know you've seen it, whenever I go with my family to Panama, the propaganda is it's intense to see it.
Mm.
From the billboards to just seeing, whether it's McDonald's or the last time I was there, you start seeing more Starbucks. It's like, Starbucks, really, son? Yeah, really? And then the billboards, you see, Kardashian and whoever at the mall, and then of course the movies, a lot of North American movies, a lot of Hollywood movie, uh and I don't know if you notice this, but my family always tells me it's like the same three people that do all the overdubs into Spanish for Hollywood films. It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
they don't even hire like a diverse voice acting
No.
community or something like that. So, but my point is, you get so people growing up in those communities, like it's very easy to grow up even overseas, and that's why my homeboy Mtume started doing his Patreon on how to read Donald Duck, that classic
Right.
book coming out of revolutionary Chile. And the point being, this is imperialism, and then people get these attitudes, and then they begin to form attitudes about not only about the country but race and class within that country.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And that's definitely something that my objective of this channel is to kind of give more voice and platform to that, especially because being of Mexican descent in Southern California, like it's Mexican centric as hell. So I don't want this space just to be about Chicanismo or Chicanos or any of that. It is about the broader quote unquote Latin American um, experience, because we have so much in common in terms of how we're treated by the US, mainly because up until like maybe 2 elections ago, everybody that was brown and south of the border was Mexican. Now
Mm.
with the fear mongering, literally it took fear mongering of MS-13 to be like, oh yeah, by the way, there's a place called Central America and there's Salvadorians and they're dangerous too. Like
Well, and then for some of us of a certain age, we'll be reconnected to that unconscious memory of how the 80s, the news media was all about El Salvador.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
all the problems in the world are starting there, or coming from there, or so it's very easy to plug back into that old unconscious cultural memory and be like, oh yeah, you remember how we implanted that hatred in you
Yeah.
earlier. Like, we could
The
turn
switch.
it back on. Yep, yep, yep.
And just because I wouldn't want our first interaction not to mention Andor. So Diego Luna and Andrea Aronja, the main
Yeah,
cast members, they do the
yeah.
dubbing for the Andor in Spanish.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they do their own voicing for Andor in Spanish. So
Did they have to fight for that, or
I'm not
did
sure to
that?
what extent. I mean, I'm sure
Good for
maybe
them.
financially, but yeah, so that was interesting. I did want to kind of stay a little bit on
Sure,
um
sure, sure.
military thing. You had like when you gave this take, it was so relieving for me because I'm like, okay, somebody said it. Somebody who intellectually is my elder and superior in every way. Aaron Bushnell, you're
Mm.
you're like the only person that came out and said, and I credit to your military background, I'm sure. You're like, so that's what you chose to do with all the training that you had and access to.
Look, it's just an honest.
But yes,
I
please.
mean, but I've always been, but my attitude has always been, I'm not, that would always be the easiest tell if something's been done to me.
Mm,
There's never going to be any self whatever. If I ever get to that point, it's always going to start being directed outward.
mhm,
So that's where I was like, you're right. I mean, that was one of my first thoughts, if not my very first thought. Like, everybody, and I get it. He got his street sign in Palestine and all that. If it's still standing, I don't know if it's been destroyed in the bombings or whatever. But in salute and all of that. But yeah, man, you could get on you can get on a base. You're a white man in a uniform with an ID.
mhm,
You can get a lot of places on base, and there's a lot of I still laugh all the time, and in some in some ways I'm glad I didn't do it. But the day I was getting out of the Navy, because of I worked in the ship's armory, and because there was a lot of confusion and stuff, and I could have walked out with a box of grenades. I mean, I could have just walked out, and I'll always wonder what if. But I mean, my point is, and that was just on a whim. That was just like a last minute. Oh shit! I could, if I just keep walking with this canister, I'm out of here with like a box of, I don't know, 12, 15 grenades. So I thought of that when Bushnell did what he did, and I'm thinking, if
so, yeah. Before, just to clarify, because I don't want it to come off like we're over here being like, well, I would have done this, I would have done that.
Oh yeah.
All credit. One of the widest things you can do, because it's not like the Buddhist monk that set himself, also aflame, that did it out of a religious context of like, well, I can't actually carry out violence myself, so this is the most direct thing I could do. It wasn't that. What really frustrates me is that Aaron Bushnell willingly signed up to be a stormtrooper, willingly signed up to join the U.S. military empire. I know yours is a little bit different. You were trying to avoid some jail time, right? So for me, I'm like, wait, you were willing to, for all extent purposes, I don't care what role you're going to serve in the U.S. military. You're going to go serve willingly in the U.S. military. And then when you grow conscious, then suddenly you're like, oh, well, I'm only going to direct it towards myself, when you signed up to direct it towards others. So that's my frustration with it. Not that what he did, it was brave, it was courageous, and it should be recognized as such. But it's also kind of like, wait, that kind of doesn't line up with.
Yeah. Now that I'm thinking about it, I mean, it dovetails nicely because I just watched it. Well, one, before I forget, please share the link to Glenn Ford, Sam Cedars thing, because I would like to see that. Yeah. And but
can I be there when you watch it?
Well, I was going to say, can you play it now? Can we watch it here?
You have time?
I don't even. Yeah, let's. How long is it? But let's make the. I'll make the time. Let's.
You'll make the. Okay, I just don't want to. Let me pull it back.
Because I know I said I try to keep it to 2 hours just because technically but I don't really have the I don't have a hard deadline here. So I would like I think we should watch it together. But
I'm so down. Yeah.
But But part of it, how I interpreted, at least, I'm remembering your exchange with Sam and Emma. Part of what your criticism was that they don't recognize, they don't recognize them. They're not willing to recognize themselves as settlers or to see settlers as being illegitimate. Mm-hmm. So in a similar way, as I'm hearing what you're saying or reinterpreting, what this Bushnell thing, it's like it's Bushnell saying, I would be willing to be violent against whoever the military tells me to be, but I can't, even in my condemnation of what I and we are doing, I can't bring myself to be violent against this very still legitimate settler power. And I know, I am kind of proud of myself. It was not a well-developed politics at the time, but I did tell my gun captain at that one moment, I did think we were about to get into combat. And I, thankfully I never had to experience it, but I was like, I'm not shooting them. Mm. And then he was like, and then I remember I told him, I said, but you can't kick my ass. You can't stop me.
Right.
So I'm leaving, and at least I'm telling you before the bullets start flying, I'm not going to be here. They shoot over here once, I'm out. And we had that line, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6.
Right.
And I ran it all day long. I used to talk anyway.
Yeah, no, I love that. I've heard this one.
Sorry, go ahead, man. Play the
All right, let's play it. And for anybody, if anybody who does want to check out what Dr. Ball is referring to, let's see the debate. Yeah, this is it right here. The debate Sam Cedar doesn't want you to see. Emma Vigeland rages. She literally accused me of being anti-Semitic out of nowhere.
She did.
And credit to Sam Cedar. I'm a hater, but this is hate you can trust. Sam Cedar immediately was like, "Nope, we're not doing that." And there's nothing more despicable than somebody pulling like the quote unquote race card on your behalf, because it's like, yo, like hold on, like I know it's the Jewish card, but still.
He did. To his credit, he did. He didn't let her go into that because she was ready.
That was, and you know what it was? That's what I'm saying. Like I don't go lightly on white women. Like, bro, like if you're willing to lie on me like this in public, what are you willing to lie about another brown man? What's going on here, man? That's grimy. But,
Yeah.
all right, let's start this from the beginning.
Argue against that.
I'm even surprised that Sam did it. Like, I remember Air America. I remember Sam and his whole crew and what people were promising. This is going to be the left antidote to Rush Limbaugh and all this other stuff. And it was so bad. Yeah.
Because it's they're just like the proto white hipster, like the whole white boy industrial podcast,
Here's 1,000 well-styled reasons to keep voting for the same Democrat. That's 100%. Basically what they were doing. Yeah.
It is. I was just watching your video on Fanon, 100 Years of Fanon, where it's like some of these, some of these liberals don't even recognize that they're counterinsurgents, right?
Yeah.
It was something along those lines. And it's like, I mean, once you get an MSNBC contract, you should know what side you're on.
Basically.
Right? All right, let's play this. Let's see.
Evil in a nutshell.
Sorry.
I know that, and I've read the piece that was from a presentation that you gave at the Left Forum entitled "Why Barack Obama is the More Effective Evil." And tell us, just lay out for us the argument in this case as to why Barack Obama is the more effective evil.
He's the more effective evil in a nutshell because there is no effective opposition to the evil that he brings about. That is, progressives, and certainly the most progressive group historically in the United States, that is black folks, have basically collapsed in terms of any resistance to his right-wing politics. And therefore, he is able to accomplish that which George Bush or a John McCain or Mitt Romney could not have hoped to accomplish. At the top of that list is preventive detention. George Bush claimed, it was his opinion, that he asserted that the office of the presidency had inherent powers to jail people without trial or charge. He made that claim, but that was just a claim. He never even tried to get that codified in an explicit bill through Congress because he knew that he probably would be defeated. The Democrats would have fought that kind of power in the hands of George Bush. That sends chills down people's spines. But Barack Obama pushed it through and signed it into law on New Year's Eve of last, effectively nullifying much of the Bill of Rights. That ranks him as the more effective evil. I don't believe a Republican could have accomplished that. I don't believe that a Republican could have gotten away with waging war undeclared for 7 months along with his NATO allies against Libya, and then coming back and saying that it was none of the Congress's business because, well, it really wasn't a war. And it wasn't a war because supposedly no Americans got killed. And there we have a new Obama doctrine. And it ain't no Bush doctrine. It's not a Republican doctrine. It's an Obama doctrine that no war exists unless Americans die in some significant numbers. This means that Barack Obama has given himself the power to use military force against anybody without provocation in the world and not even report to Congress about it as long as Americans don't die in significant numbers. That's not a lesser evil. That's a much more effective evil. And we could go on down the line. There's about 4 more very important categories, but I'll take a break and give you a chance to talk.
No, I mean,
Sorry, I caught you when you stood up. Just to highlight something, because you mentioned Bill Clinton earlier, I felt the same way about NAFTA. Republicans could not push forward NAFTA, and it took Bill Clinton to push it over. And that, I mean, the effects that talking immigration, the so-called, decimation of the middle class, like the reactionary turn, the allegiance to corporate power, a full allegiance to corporate power from the Democratic Party, like it didn't start there, but for me, the highlight is NAFTA. And again, you could almost make this argument that Glenn is making with every Democratic president. FDR saved capitalism at the end of the day, and he's praised
Absolutely.
as the highest pillar. What was everybody saying? Oh, Joe Biden is the most progressive president since
Yep.
FDR. Yeah. Did you want to add anything before
And
we?
no, the only thing I was thinking immediately is that this is frustrating because and I could give some benefit of the doubt as to how it happened, but folks should be reminded that Glenn lived in Newark.
Mm.
He's a 20-minute train ride from Air America Studios and could have been sitting right in there live, for equally good video and audio and all of that kind of presentation. You know, again, I don't know, can't say that it wasn't offered and it wasn't a possibility, but I just was thinking about that as we were just sitting here a second ago, like, this, it would have been great if we had had an in-studio version of this intellectual beatdown. But yeah, that was it.
Oh, I want to be honest as possible. I think Sam Cedar has demonstrated to be anti-black. I don't know if you caught his debate with Brianna Joy Gray. It was over like the whole forced to vote.
I didn't see that either.
This was years ago. It was like a huge thing in the white online left where, hey, the squad should take advantage of this moment of choosing Nancy Pelosi as the House Speaker to guarantee some concessions, right? Predominantly to the concession of putting Medicare for all to a vote during a pandemic, right? And Sam Cedar and his crew were downplaying that and literally spreading lies about the fact that McCarthy could get elected as the Speaker of the House when it's literally impossible to do that for all intents and purposes while being the minority party. That being said, Brianna Joy Gray, for all my criticism of her, especially avoiding accountability from you, is to be clear about her. To be clear, sorry, about her kind of like coddling the white post, quote unquote, post duopoly populist, wing, whatever they are. I think they're reactionaries regardless. But that being said, she schooled him, like whooped them left to right.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Demonstrating, I mean, she's not just intelligent, but so educated as well. And Sam Cedar, I always say he is the centrist Ben Shapiro, right?
I liked your line on that. Yeah. I like that.
They're both failed like Hollywood guys that were trying to be funny, man, and didn't do it. And so, let me cling on to politics. I'm like, all right, cool. What have you done in politics for 20 years? What has Sam Cedar done other than make money? All right. So he, after the debate, he tweeted out saying like, oh, I was yelled at for, like an hour or whatever. And everybody's like, whoa, bro, like it got heated, but it's a debate. Like you wouldn't say this about any other debate that you had with a white man. Like that was a dog whistle towards the whole angry black woman stereotype. And Brianna Joy Gray never, pulls that card. So she literally like called that out, just slightly apologizing, saying like, oh, maybe next time you should come better prepared. I'm sorry that you felt that way. And then he was forced to tweet out saying like, oh, I realized I shouldn't have said I was yelled at. I should have said admonished, that I was admonished. And I'm like, oh, so you're telling me that you're upset that your dog whistle was a little too loud. Right? So you're apologizing for not being slick enough with your anti-blackness, not that you haven't, that you got caught, in other words. And I'm like, oh, it would be in a situation where this white liberal gets schooled by a black woman, that he's feeling a type of way, intellectually insecure, that he got schooled like that, and he rages out. That's when you really see that, the racism at the heart of a white liberal. And so, I mean, Brianna Joy Gray doesn't pull that card almost ever. But man, like, for me, and the fact that the only time he ever references like knowing black people, he goes back like to like the 90s about like a friend of coworker of his getting pulled over. And I'm like, wait, if you have to go that far back to talk about the time that you had a black friend, that's kind of weird. But also the fact that his show, as you mentioned, out in the East Coast, and he's had like this white cast this entire time.
Well, I mean, I don't watch. Very rarely do I watch a direct clip of his show. So I usually will see it, what they do in some sort of other, somebody else either criticizing or, commenting on it. But it is true. I don't recall, other than this clip you're playing right now, I don't think I can think of any other time that I've seen Sam talking to a Black person or even referencing to the work of Black people. Now, I'm sure, because I don't watch enough, that it happens. Right. But I'm just, off the top of my head, you're right. I mean, it is, to be a white liberal from entertainment in New York and to have this few Black.
Right. Well, to be honest, he does have Black guests on. I'm saying his team, like he doesn't hire non-white people.
And well, there's that one brother I see who's in their rotation with the like the secondary crew, like when
the
Sam's
secondary
not
crew,
there.
And he's I think for a while he was overseas. So it's like,
okay.
And then he always had kind of like a little janky setup, which I was like, man, they can't
get him an actual mic or whatever.
They can't say like the legit stuff. Like, and yes, the B team, in other words, that Sam isn't really directly involved in that.
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. No, I get it.
That's kind of weird, right? But all right, let's push forward.
I mean, I think there's that's. I mean, I more or less. I mean, I think tend to agree with that. I mean, I think that I have less confidence that in those particular areas that a Democratic, presuming the control of Congress by a Democratic, House, let's say, or a Democratic Senate would have really been, particularly on those national security issues where I think Democrats are particularly sort of timid in sort of asserting what should be more legitimate policies. I tend to believe that, under a John McCain, let's say, or a George Bush, that the Democrats would have put up much of a fight. In other words, in terms of Libya, it wasn't just incumbent upon President Obama to report to Congress. It was incumbent upon Congress also to assert their power in a way that I'm not convinced they would have done with a John McCain, let's say, or a President Bush. I do think that President Obama has codified certain things in a way that Bush never felt was necessary because they believed in a unitary executive theory that allowed them to sort of play fast and loose with these things. But let's
and did not test it. If they believed, if they were confident that they could have tested it legislatively, they would have. They were not confident.
Well, but they felt that. I mean, I think the Bush administration felt that they specifically didn't have to test it legislatively because the power was inherent in the executive. And I think it may be. I mean, I think there's a very strong case that it's more problematic that these things are being codified and brought into the sort of the scope of rule of law in some fashion because they have more staying power, frankly. And
actually, with the passage of the law by the Congress, we then have the executive branch asserting the inherent power. We have Congress passing actual legislation, and that makes the prospects of the Supreme Court, this court or another court, ruling this unconstitutional, much more remote.
Right.
That was a huge line that was passed. But if you want to get domestic, let's do so. From the very beginning.
Sorry. I want to highlight something. The fact that he's saying, Bush took the approach of ask for forgiveness, not for permission. Right? Obama is saying like, no, like I want it on writing that I can do this and every other president can do this. How are you even going to argue that which one is worse? If you're putting it down on paper, you're giving everyone a permission slip.
Mm-hmm.
You're not trying to weasel your way through it. You're not hoping to avoid consequences, especially being held accountable by the next administration because they're always covering for each other. But like to even make that argument, it's so weak and so like it holds no ground. But he has to spew something, right? He has to push something forward, and he's been doing it for 20 years. This is a 12-year-old video, and nonstop making these excuses to try and downplay, the true, again, effective evil of the Democratic Party.
No, and I think first of all, as you were saying that, I was thinking something similar. Like this is, what you and I are doing right now is a great of great service to, as a historical reminder of how whack and old and recycled these
Mhm.
arguments are. Because and again, this is also why almost every so-called major black radical leader that we can think of had a very particular criticism for white liberals. Malcolm Martin, Kwame Ture, Assata Shakur. I mean, everybody has, because their ultimate goal here is to make sure the critique and the activism doesn't go too far.
Right.
So you can see Sam doing the same thing here. Yes, I largely agree with you, but
Right.
don't go too far, because we got to have you come back to ultimately say, oh, but I think if McCain and Bush had won, it wouldn't have been this, that, or he wouldn't have been, and then, anyway, so yeah,
100%. And but in the meantime, within the framework of what you're able to be critical of, they pat themselves in the back because they're like, no, actually, we were critical of this and that. And I'm like, within the liberal frame.
Right. Oh no, I'm against genocide too. I mean, we have to vote for it, but I'm against it too. No, it's terrible. But it would be worse genocide if the other people get, it's like, I get it. Yeah.
Exactly. I should have tear when I submit my ballot. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
No, I mean, sorry. Emma Vigling literally cried on air when
really?
When Francesca Fiorentini congratulated her for like her coverage. She cried about like, oh, thank you. This has changed my chemical makeup of my brain, this and that. And then a couple months go by, and she's on that show, that podcast, Bad Hasbro, with Francesca Fiorentini's husband, and she admits that throughout the majority of that time of the genocide, she had a Zionist therapist, and that she didn't want to stop talking to her or find a new therapist because she didn't want to be accused of being anti-Semitic.
What?
This is Emma Vigeland. This is Emma Vigeland. Yeah, this is the co-host of. Let me see. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Yeah, if I can't find it quick, it's fine. We'll move forward. But yeah, it was disgusting, and I usually like to present receipts if you want to see it, but if not, it's fine. We'll move forward.
No, I take your word for it on that one.
Yeah,
I mean, but
she doesn't deserve the time. All right.
That is before he was even elected. Barack Obama proved that he was the more effective evil. If you remember, the Bush bailout bill in October of 2008 failed. I remember it failed on a Monday. And Barack Obama flew into the rescue that week and got on the phone, called not just everybody in the Black Caucus, but every Democrat he could get a hold to. And by Friday, that verdict had been reversed. And it was recognized at the time, and I'm going to remind folks now, Barack Obama saved George Bush's bailout bill. If you think that bailout was evil, and I do, the circumstances show that Barack Obama was certainly the more effective evil in that regard. Before Barack Obama
just quickly. Please, folks, and don't take my word for it, but I think we all should go back and revisit some of that time in history. This is when Barack Obama is a senator. This is when, and for folks just quickly to remember, Glenn Ford and his late colleague, comrade Bruce Dixon, who came out of Chicago, they knew Obama. They knew about him from well before all of this, and knew the hustle, the pre-hype politics and the work. So they have like they're the reason Sam and so many others ran into a buzzsaw every time they fucked around, and excuse my language, and invited Glenn or Bruce on, is because not only the study and but they had a long history with this dude, and we're warning about this dude as a Trojan horse, using Martin Kilson's old framing, for a long time. And then here comes Obama, and as Glenn is reminding us, to your point about Roosevelt, Obama came in there to save capitalism, and then did it again with Eric Holder as his black attorney general, saying the banks are too big to fail. We can't not bail them out. And then turning around to black people and telling black people, pull your pants up, be better parents. Going to the African world and the Muslim world, violence doesn't solve problems. Have your revolutions peacefully, like we did in the United States. Like, people, please go back. Oh my God. Anyway, I'm sorry. This is great.
No, yeah.
Great.
And especially for like younger people that have only grown up with the myth of Obama, or even just the criticism of his presidency, and not how he was always plotting, very much demonstrating what he was going to do. I hate this idea that like, oh, well, he was new, we didn't know. No, you didn't know. You didn't know.
It was very clear.
Yeah.
Glenn and Bruce were leading the way. Margaret Kimberly leading the way, telling everybody, look who he's bringing into his cabinet. Look who his funders are. As someone pointed out to me, and I can't give him credit because I never got his name. We happened to be sitting next to each other on a plane, and somehow we started talking about it. But his point was, and Glenn and Bruce's work helped prove this, that people were saying, Obama's running a grassroots campaign. And meanwhile, he was getting more Wall Street funding than anybody in history before him. And this guy on the plane said to me, if people think that their donations are helping Barack Obama, it's like going to the ocean. It's like pissing in the ocean and claiming credit for the rising tide. I said, that's a bar, but that's exactly what was happening. But the propaganda around what Obama was severe. And anyway, my bad. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. All right, let's keep going.
In January of 2009, he put Social Security and other entitlements explicitly on the table. He held a press conference and told reporters that's what would happen under his regime. And remember, the Republicans were probably at their lowest ebb in decades, demoralized. People were talking about a party that might never get up off of its back. So they were in no position to press forward on Social Security. Remember that George Bush got his butt whooped decisively in his first term on Social Security, and the Republicans had very, very little to say. They didn't even want to broach that subject after that huge defeat. But who introduces it? Who puts it on the table? Even before he takes the oath of office, Barack Obama. And then he appoints this deficit reduction commission and makes austerity a bipartisan issue at a time when the Democrats controlled both houses of Congress, at a time when the Republicans were still demoralized and not very aggressive on this issue that they've been whooped on not too long ago. So he is the architect, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of the politics of this, of bringing austerity back as part of his grand plan of bipartisan agreements between business and government, certainly not business and labor, since labor's not even in his equation, except in terms of getting help for re-election.
All right, so and I mean, I agree, and I can go through a list of we know the reports from the Washington Post that he's put this grand bargain on the table, and really it was only because of the just how far to the right the Republicans have moved that basically prevented the President Obama's attempts to cut Social Security and Medicare. Frankly, that
he made them an offer they shouldn't have been able to refuse,
yes,
and
indeed.
they did, and that's all that saved us.
Indeed.
So, okay. One of the reasons that I voted for Biden, that I can admit, that the first time, was because Dr. Carr's argument about local judges, right? And so because of that, and I have family members who, unfortunately are in the prison complex. So I was like, all right, I felt guilty about that. But the other half of it was I was so naive into thinking that if Alejandra Ocasio-Cortez, if AOC could maintain the same pressure about ICE, about the concentration camps on the border, then Biden might be forced because of her popularity to actually bring forth some type of progress in that area. What do we get instead? We we get this border bill that Lindsey Graham, the Klansman himself, was telling Republicans, we need to vote for this because even if Donald Trump gets elected, we're not going to have this opportunity without offering a pathway to citizenship. So again, Joe Biden was giving the Republican Party, in terms of immigration and border policy, a deal they could not refuse that was too good to be true, something that they could not accomplish on their own. And it took Donald Trump to say, nope, don't vote for this. I need this as a campaign issue. So the Democratic Party, time and time again, gives the Republican Party everything they want on a silver platter. And the only reason the Republicans say no is because, their political ambition. But look where we're at, that we're being saved by the Republican Party from the Democratic Party.
Yeah, no, that's and again, this is what was not to keep going back to it, but what was so troublesome to me about Dr. Carr's argument that it's not that you are being naive or others are being naive. It's that there's so little offering of any other form of analysis or frame for people to consider, and that people like Carr should be playing a better role or a different role in opening that up, even if it's to say, look, tactically, we're still going to da. Like, I'm not even mad at that so much. It's this whole condemnation of the Glenn Ford or any other form of argument against that kind of electoral behavior. So that's my only anyway.
All right.
All right. That's the only reprieves we've got.
So here's the question. Going forward, the question that has been dogging me, and I think the question as I have been struggling with, and for the moment, let's presume that I'm not voting in New York State, which I am. So I have a certain latitude in terms of the way that I will exercise my vote. But going forward, the question for me is, can you outline how, I guess, I mean, as far as I can tell, we have two choices in this election as to who at this point have a reasonable.
I'm sorry. Can you stop it? This is exactly my point. Yeah. This is exactly my point. So again, Sam, back in 2007-8, Sam, could you spend the next 8 years, since you're going to vote for Obama twice, opening up the floor so that in 2016 we have something else to talk about? And you just sat there and said, as people in the chat were acknowledging, you just nodded along with Glenn as he's reciting boom, boom, all the shit. And you're like, yeah. And I but
I agree.
But this is where we are, Glenn. Yeah. For this election, this is where we are, Glenn.
Yep.
And it's oh man, looking back on it is super irritating. So I'm sorry, that was it. I just
and for the people in chat saying like, well, he's agreeing, I'm like, that's part of the fucking problem.
Yes,
that's part of the problem, that he's acknowledging reality for what it is and still making excuses to vote for them.
He's not going. This is what happens consistently. There is no argument against what Glenn is saying about Obama and the Democrats, other than to say what we're about to hear a version of. We don't have any, what are we going to do? And I have a latitude because I'm in New York, but what about everybody else? What are they going to do?
No, even when they have a latitude, Hassan Piker, the biggest leftist streamer, admitted that he voted for Harris.
Really?
Even in California, you're voting for Harris? Even in New York, you're voting for Obama? Like, how? Like,
that's wild, because we know he didn't vote for her when she was running for the nomination, because she got no support. So like now you're gonna vote for her?
That's hilarious. I was about to ask, wait, how do you know that?
Well, because nobody voted for her. Nobody voted for her.
You're so right. You're so right.
That's wild.
All right, so let's hear the truth. Because
by the way, does Hassan ever interview like so-called third party, alternative party?
He spreads a lie about the Green Party not doing anything other than running for the presidency.
Oh,
which
wow.
is a both-ways lie. And he also never mentions the fact that the Democratic Party goes out of their way to be undemocratic and try to take the Green Party out through like legal
They're
means.
the number one op.
Yes,
the
exactly.
Democrats are the number one op
for
the Green Party. Yeah.
Somebody mentioned that he had Marianne Williamson on once. Marianne Williamson was running as a Democrat, and she wasn't running. She was on a book tour. Furthermore, that was one of the reasons why I started streaming, was because I noticed that Marianne Williamson not only was on a book tour, but she was, spreading that liberal Zionism by trying to downplay Zionist history, so much so that she was on this show called The Vanguard. And there's these two white men who basically just do TMZ style slop. They're kind of proud of it. But if you're going to do that, why are you interviewing a supposed presidential candidate, right? It makes no sense. But they pointed out who, I think it was Rashida Tlaib or Ilhan Omar mentioned something about the U.S. and Israel being a settler colonial project. And Marianne took offense to that. And she's like, actually, no, while we're critical of what Israel became, the origins are very different than the U.S.
Oh,
and
wow.
She starts doing that, even goes so far to say that she feels sad that the American left and the Zionist left are no longer aligned. And I'm like, it was the Zionist left that created and established, the Zionist project that legitimized it internationally. So that's what we should be most critical of. And these guys just nodded along, didn't fight back, didn't push back. When I called them out on it, they further doubled down and started saying things like, oh, the kibbutz were actually, like socialist, commune, anarchist projects that we should like admire, basically. And I'm like, would you say the same thing of Jamestown? Sorry, John, would you say the same thing about the settler projects here?
But it's just it's also historically dishonest in that even if you wanted to be relatively politically safe, you could just simply point out that many Jews have pointed out that the kibbutzim was a hustle.
100%.
That got the like a lot, including, by the way, my own family. By the way, and I always have to have the caveat that I only know these stories as myth. I don't have any real connection, so I don't want to misrepresent myself here. But as it was handed down to me, the story was that's how my grandmother, who was born in Palestine, left, because her father was like, we're not in agreement. We see the hustle here. We got tricked out of Eastern Europe, and we're not down with this project. And we're out of there well before 47, 48. But the point is that, Jews know that that's a hustle. This whole thing that this kibbutz was socialist, revolutionary. Get the hell out of here. That's why so yeah, I can't, man, John Henry Clark was right, man. When it comes to Israel, everybody starts lying.
Yeah. And I'll just wrap that up with saying, Zach and Gavin are the two white men that run that podcast, The Vanguard. They wrapped it up by Gavin saying, well, I think there were some good, Zionist leaders. They just went about it the wrong way. And I'm like,
wow.
Oh, okay, this is...
No, you're right. Yeah. You're right. And the film Roots showed us benevolent slave masters too. So, not everybody was, let's not be too critical of this situation now.
We don't want to paint a broad brush here.
No. Right. Broad brush. We want to be specific. We don't want to be reductionist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you see why I started streaming? I was just kind of, all right, let me call this out.
No, and I'm glad that you did. Why not? Right. Yeah.
And it's either Romney or Obama. And for me, the question is, what is going to bring about the best outcomes from a left perspective? And so, can you tell me, like, what?
I'm sorry to cut it again, but is there like is there an editor? Like, I would even put in money. I would put $5. I got $5 on an editor who would go back and find all of these clips of all of these people from what is this, 2007, 2008 to 2024, with this exact same. There's got to be like a supercut that could be made of this exact. Look, which is going to give us the most likely. You know, it's either Romney or Obama. It's either, that's all we had. Which is going to give more likely room for the left? What did he say for the left? Did he actually say the left or liberal?
It's going to get worse. Yeah, for the left.
Wow.
Bro.
All right, my bad. Go ahead. All right,
no, and then this is from 2012, I believe, right? Yeah. So,
this is 2012. So this is after. Wait, this is after 4 years already.
This is after 4 years.
Holy
Dr. Ball, after 4 years.
Shit. For some reason, I thought this is before the first one. My bad. Go ahead.
Because it's so ridiculous. Because it's so preposterous. That's why. Unless they re-uploaded, later on. But 12 years ago.
Oh, right. Yeah.
No excuse. All right.
Perspective would be. And then
the best outcome for a left perspective would be for there to be a left that acts like it's alive. The worst outcome from a left perspective is for the left to remain quiescent, dormant, looking quite dead. That would be the best outcome. What happens in the future will depend upon resistance to these two corporate parties. Nothing good comes out of either one of these formations, which answer to the same corporate masters.
Well, now, from my perspective, observing what has taken place over the past decade, let's say, that one of the things that I found during the Bush, or that I have sort of come to perceive in retrospect during the Bush administration, was that the left, in some ways, was subsumed by subsumed in some ways by sort of partisan opposition. And one of the things that I think that the Obama presidency has done is to at least stake out what is a genuine left position versus what is a partisan position. And frankly,
you mean an anti-war movement as opposed to an anti-Republican war movement? Is that what you
indeed,
mean?
and I'm and both also on and particularly on economic terms. I mean, the most relevant arguments I've had about why Social Security should not be cut have been with people who 6 years ago we were both arguing against President Bush's attempt to cut Social Security, to privatize it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious as to your perspective on that.
Well, there is no question that broadly speaking, the Occupy movement changed the conversation. That is, we had Obama and his Democrats speaking austerity, and of course the Republicans speaking austerity. And the voice that interrupted that dialogue of the same was the Occupy movement. And you are correct. For that kind of principled kind of dissent to arise under a Democratic administration, as not masking itself as something else under Republicans, and not a move on kind of opposition that gets torn down and dismantled as soon as the Democrats in power. That is a good thing. That is cause for hope. Let's get some more of the same. Well, you seem to be saying then that the best chemistry for that kind of actual principled opposition is under a Democrat as opposed to a Republican?
I mean, I tend to believe that. I mean, because I saw 8 years of Bush, and the choices we had at the end of the day, essentially, in terms of by the time we get to January in the primary in 2000, I guess 8, is Edwards, Clinton, and Obama. Now, I was an Edwards supporter at that time, and he didn't make it past, I think it was January or February, and putting aside the implications of what would have come about had he made it beyond that. The choice, it seems to me that this rightward lurch, and and to be sure, it wasn't just under it was handmaiden by Clinton and of course
who you also
Reagan,
told us
and
to
even
vote for.
arguably Carter before that. Delivered us essentially a corporatist who was perceived because of both, I think, his profile and some of his pronouncements to be a at least semi-populist savior. And my fear is that under, contrary to an argument that I see out there by some, I'm not saying you're making this argument, is that 4 years of Romney will somehow bring about a more vigorous left in this country. And my experience has been it was the opposite.
Oh,
Sorry, just real quick. Sam Cedar also still holds a grudge against Ralph Nader. So it's like,
of course. And then of course we saw,
What?
Yeah, no, of course it's all Nader's fault. But of course the 8 years of Obama demonstrated that the anti-war movement was neutered while he was in office. So this idea that Sam Cedar is defending is but again, the point is to frame Glenn and others like him as, oh, you're telling us to have a Republican be in office, and that would be better. You think it would be better under Trump? That's why, look at what we have now. That's the whole point of the tactic here. It's
always that.
irritating.
It's always, oh, you rather Romney? Oh, you rather Trump? And it's like,
and that's why I liked a few minutes ago when Glenn brilliantly did so what are you trying to draw the distinction between an anti-war left and an anti-war Republican left? Like, like which is the act, what are we? We're only anti-war when it's Republicans? Oh, okay. All right.
Exactly. And Obama, excuse me. Sam Cedar was trying to highlight that like Obama kind of made the waters murkier with that, when in reality it's like, as we'll see shortly, and it's kind of funny that you mentioned that, Obama legitimized support for empire abroad in the Black community, something that had no white Democrat or Republican.
And Glenn wrote about this all the time. He talked about all the time how Black America had always been the cutting edge of a left critique, especially in the anti-war community.
Yeah, and
Obama completely messed that up.
And it's funny because like you could tell that Glenn's kind of like, using baby gloves here, like kind of just, oh yeah, playing along with it. When, as you highlight, like he was talking about this already. Not just that, the fact that Sam Cedar himself is admitting defeat by saying, well, Clinton kind of started that, and I guess you go back to Carter as well. And I'm like, exactly, you're proving the point.
That's the point.
Reality.
And that's why we should stop doing this and break this cycle. But yeah.
But then you're gonna have a bad guy in office.
I don't predict that it will bring about a more vigorous left. There's just a chance for it. You see, there will be no progressive revival if Black folks are not deeply involved in it. By my reckoning, and every 5 years or so, I do a calculation to satisfy myself as to what percentage of the population is reliably progressive, and it always came out to about half of that proportion is Black. There is no possibility of a successful or a vital, rather, progressive movement without the active participation of the most historically progressive group in the country, and that's Black folks. And as long as Obama is there, Black people will be neutralized. The Black folks are less relevant today politically than they have been in 40 years. And that's because they make no demands, and they make no demands because they don't want to embarrass this first black president. So yes, you have these stirrings, such as the Occupy Wall Street movement, an overwhelmingly a white movement. But you don't have those stirrings among black folks, and you won't as long as this guy's there.
But isn't the
what do you remember when Kamala Harris got interrupted by pro-Palestinian anti-genocide protesters, and what was the line? Excuse me, I'm speaking, or I'm speaking now, something along those lines. With what we're seeing now, what do you think she could have really gotten away with? Like, how bad do you think it would have been? Because I've seen people even speculate that we would have been cheering her on if she would have done the exact same bombing of Iran as like a girl boss energy.
Oh, absolutely. Oh no, it took me a second to catch up to your question, but yeah, absolutely. I think what Glenn is outlining that happened under Obama would have gone maybe even into hyperdrive, considering that Kamala would have been coming in after Trump, who was seen at that time as being worse than I think George Bush was seen at the time Obama got elected. So the issue of being a first woman, being at least black enough, relatively speaking, I guess. I think, I could easily see that all that is still going on now from Palestine to Iran would be championed. All the people that posted that meme of the AI image of the black women sitting sipping coffee while the world burned. I mean, I could easily see them like another version of that as they are congratulating themselves as Iran burns, or Palestine burns. They're like, but we did it, girl, like that would be certainly the encouraged. Because it was being encouraged before she got elected. Before she lost the election, we were being encouraged to support all of that.
But in their defense, I'm sure people in Iran are anti-black, and I'm sure there's a lot of anti-black.
Sure. So they deserve it. Yeah.
They're asking for it.
Right. They're asking for it. And if they had been waving red, black, and green flags and supporting reparations, I'm sure they would, be faring better today.
I will say, I think that what Clinton did to Gaddafi, right? Sure, the material and the actual, the empire's need for that to occur, 100% is there, and that's a prominent aspect of it. But I do think she went out of her way to be in front of that and to take credit for it. She literally said, "We came, we saw him, and we killed him," or something along those lines.
Yeah,
for her presidential candidacy.
Absolutely. She knew,
I'm a woman, but I could get the job done.
And she knew. First of all, she knew she was going to win, and she just figured, I'll have this added, support for my campaign which I'm sure she thought would have only been an issue in running against the Republican, not her own party.
Exactly.
But absolutely, you're right.
Well, even Harris 100%. Was like, "We're gonna have the most lethal military." I'm like, wait, when haven't we? What are you talking about?
She said that. She said explicitly nothing's going to change in the Middle East. The only thing she couldn't have at the time copped to in advance was supporting the bombing of Iran.
Right.
And
but she did say Iran is our biggest enemy.
So I stand corrected. You're right. You're right. Absolutely. I'm wrong again. Yeah. So she. Yeah.
You mentioned having creating clips of all this. I need to create one, and I've been wanting for Emma Vigeland, again, the co-host of the Majority Report, because she went out of her way to try and wash the blood off of Harris's hands. But she literally said that we cannot know for sure. Very, very Boondocks coded, where it's we don't know what we don't know. She's like, we cannot know for sure that Harris is more committed to Israel than Joe Biden because of Joe Biden's long track record. And I'm like, well, yeah, he's older and he's been in politics longer. Of course, we can never, equate their commitment to Zionism because one has been doing it longer. Like, what are you talking about?
Wow.
And
look,
yeah,
people, if they haven't already, I do want to double down on that. They should watch your video of the exchange. I mean, as you pointed out in it, she immediately is, what is it, clutching her pearls over the idea that somebody could be criticizing her position and Sam's position on Israel, and then she immediately makes sure to frame the discussion under her defense of Israel's right to exist. Because if you say, and I've admittedly over the years struggled in certain settings around this question, trying to avoid being seen as saying Israel does not have the right to exist, because you don't want to get caught. And you did very well with that. But she's immediately trying to set that frame, that how dare somebody be critical of us? And of course, Israel has a right to exist. Now you go and explain. now overcome all of that and explain whatever possible criticism you could have of our show here. And I mean, and so I again, I thought it was very telling the way her immediate. But I've always said for years, I mean, one of the reasons why I've never watched, or I should say rarely watched Sam Cedar's show, even or listened to it from back in the Air America days, is that it's so easy for them to spend most of their time criticizing Republicans and right-wing YouTubers. It just makes it's just so easy for them to make fun of Tim Pool all day. and Patrick Bet David and all of that, and Joe Rogan. It's super easy because their positions are laughable. I mean, those people are insane. But as soon as someone from the actual left spaces engages them, it becomes, as she I think demonstrated very clearly, like wait, we're the farthest left anybody intelligently could go. And therefore, you have to be, as she tried to end up with you, anti-Semitic and all of that. Anyway, my bad. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, you're good. And thank you for that. I mean, I'm like, wait, are you pulling the anti-Semitic card? And she said, well, if the shoe fits. And I'm like, oh, you're slick, because you're not literally calling me anti-Semitic. You're hinting at it. You're signaling to your audience about it. And now you're still not willing to hold on to it by saying, yes, I think you're anti-Semitic. She's like, if the shoe fits. And this is kind of, I titled this about the propaganda of the online left. What you're saying is so accurate, because when I called in before to the Majority Report, and I think I was actually like blacklisted because I had to use a different phone number to call in to criticize them about their Zionist take. And that first time we got into it, and Sam Cedar got offended because I said about his MSNBC contract. And he does this thing where he kind of admits why I'm correct. He said, oh, well, I guess if you're taking the Chomsky approach about corporations only hiring people, media outlets only hiring people that are not going to, transgress on, what is acceptable. I'm like, yes, that's literally what I'm saying. And that's who you are.
But hasn't he acknowledged that he's too left for MSNBC and that's why he doesn't get invited back?
I don't know. I mean, because Cenk Uygur does the same thing. Cenk Uygur does the Union Buster Cenk Uygur, which, by the way, all these little, not little, they're 20 times my size, but the Humanist Report, Emil Vigeland has admitted to this. Others have admitted to this on the left, that when TYT workers tried to unionize, they took the side of Cenk Uygur.
Oh, wow.
Because Cenk Uygur's whole line was, oh, this is a political hit job, because at the time he was running some local election. And I'm like, wait, even if it was a political hit job, wouldn't that benefit the workers over their boss?
Look, this has been an issue for a minute. I mean, I'm happy to be checked on this, and it's been some time since I would have been in the know. But, over the years, this has been an issue that has come up with Democracy Now! I don't know if they've ever changed their support for unionized labor in their spot. It's been 10 years now at this point, but when I was briefly in a temporary working relationship with the Real News Network, they weren't supportive. The leadership at that time wasn't supportive of unionized labor. And these are supposed to be the alternatives, the left, so that's wild. That's wild. But once you're in charge, I guess, and a unionized workforce would be a problem for you, I guess. Yeah.
Well, Emma Vigeland admitted that she was concerned about not rocking the boat, and she was concerned about her career. And then she's like, well, I wasn't making much money at the time. Her parents are like crazy rich lawyers. Like,
yeah, but she wasn't making much money.
Right. Excuse me. Right. You're right. My bad. You're right.
But to your point, that's look, I don't know. That's why, but to your point, that's why workers should unionize.
Yep, exactly. Literally, right?
Yeah. You're not making much money. Duh.
Yeah. All right.
Isn't that problem of co-optation it seems to me, I guess my argument is that under a Republican administration, that co-optation takes place not just amongst black people, but also that other half of their sort of more progressive cohort, in that group of progressives. I mean, I see sort of just broader co-optation that ends up getting sort of channeled into a partisan mix. I mean, it seems to me what has to happen is that that part of the black community that makes up that progressive or truly left movement in this country needs to sort of assert themselves, as well as the remaining people in that cohort have to assert themselves in the context of a democratic president, that we have a left that is actually sort of growing up not as a function of partisan politics, but as a function of ideology.
Well, who could argue against that? What I'm telling you, we in the Black is Back Coalition organized in 2009 to make the kind of public statement that not all black folks had drunk the Obama laid, but we see it in the stats that still he gets overwhelming support, and that is not going to change. But you have maneuvered me into talking about what are the prospects here for the left. I do want to go back and say what Obama has actually accomplished, which is evil, is scary enough. And it is more in some fundamental ways than that which Bush accomplished, certainly, and which I think any Republican could have accomplished. So there is reason to oppose Obama based upon his actual practice and evil accomplishments. I don't know how you best, how you pull a bigger one than preventive detention, but I'm sure there are ways.
How about lying us into a war where we kill 100,000 plus civilians?
Sure, those possibilities are endless,
and just notice, 12 years ago, lying us into a war was bad enough to resist at all costs. Now in 2025 or 2024, a genocide apparently isn't enough.
But so first of all, and Glenn was, I think, relatively polite there. First of all, Sam Cedar, with all due respect, the black left doesn't need your suggestion and advice for what to do. And in fact, the black left had been doing the work that Sam was saying the black left needed to be doing has been largely resisted or blunted, in part because of what this so-called white left has been doing in producing waves of propaganda and analysis against radical politics, platforming preferred black liberals, look, I'm having admittedly a little bit of a personal triggered moment in remembering, for a time, there was a long time I took it upon myself to contact supposedly white progressive outlets saying, why aren't you inviting Glenn to your platform? You're acting like the farthest left Black analysis you can find is, at the time, I guess, Michael Dyson or something like that. Like, you're acting like the Sam Cedars, where I probably emailed or reached out to the Majority Report at the, and was saying, like, you're acting like there is no room or no one farther to your left or to the left of your favorite Black person than. So that was one thing. I was there at the founding of the Black is Back Coalition, and was aware of how difficult it was for Omali Yeshitela, Glenn Ford, Margaret Kimberly, Bruce Dixon, to a lesser extent myself, to get invited to these spaces to offer up another version when Sam and others could find, again, their preferred, it seems like he's not improved over these years. They could find their preferred Black spokesperson. So there's a point I'm forgetting. There's something else I wanted to say, but maybe it'll come back. That's why I wanted to. That's why 2 hours needs to be roughly a limit, because I start to.
I feel you.
But yeah. Nah, it'll come back. But there was something else that I wanted, that clip was wanting me to remember. But anyway,
Well, whenever you're ready to tap out, also like it's all good.
No, I want to make it through this interview at least. I'm gonna make it. Now I'm here. Now
Sure. No,
now I gotta
Yeah, and it's funny because like at first people in the comments were saying like, why is this guy like talking so much? Doesn't he have Dr. Ball here to hear his thoughts? And I'm like, oh, I should have started. I thought I said that like we were covering your interview with Pancho. So I'm like, well, I kind of have to talk, but I love the fact that we went from that to then hearing your discussions now to watching Glenn Ford together. It's like, it's awesome.
Oh, look, as I told you before, as a mechanism for, I don't know if I said it this way, as a mechanism always to relax myself, I just remind, like, this doesn't have to be, we don't have to get this exactly right. Like, we can always have another conversation. Like the beauty of if there is one of YouTube, of this podcast, we could just do this again another time. I would like to revisit this question of Chicano Zionism. But I admit, I just would, maybe need to read some things or get some others involved in the conversation. But anyway, I don't feel like you've over talked, so I don't know if I'm enjoying this. This is, in this part right here, this is all, despite what I said about the trigger warning, this is all great.
No, and I love the fact too that like we said, your relationship with Glenn Ford, that you haven't seen this video, the fact that we both don't like Sam Cedar because he's the epitome of a white liberal, but also like that you were there, literally you said you were there at the founding, like
yeah, I mean, I remember, I was I kind of remember the because again, up until I don't know 2015, 2016, 2014, somewhere around there, I was very close with Glenn and Bruce, and I was there with Glenn when it went from, when he moved from Black Commentator and started Black Agenda. Okay. In fact, Peter Gamble, who was the sort of white editor and money behind Black Commentator, tried to get me to take it over when Glenn said he was leaving. And I was like, nah, I'm with Glenn. Like, I'm out.
Yeah.
So like, Glenn, ever since we met in the early 2000s, Glenn was a very important figure to me. And, so I was always trying to rock with him and support his work. And because I started working with him at Black Agenda, and that's even saying too much. I was a relatively low level contributor to Black Agenda, but but because of that relationship, I was around when he got invited spaces. I often got invited as sort of the backup or whatever. So and our association got me invited into the Black is Back coalition when he and O'Malley started it, and as he said, that was the point. To not only as a rallying cry for Black people, but as a reminder to the rest of the world, like not all of us are suckered by this Obama thing. Like, get out of here. So yeah.
Well, I think a big reason that, because you mentioned earlier, like you never see the Majority Report have Glenn Ford on again. You never see him have like real, radical Black figures that would actually call out their cooperation and allegiance to the Democratic Party and larger the empire. The same reason that I think Dr. Carr and other figures are upset at you is because your presence alone, especially if it's platform, demonstrates that they're fraudulent. How their positions are in alignment with empire, and you want to distance yourself as much as possible. I don't think Sam Cedar hasn't interviewed Chris Hedges, who I have a lot of criticism, especially his anti-communism stuff, but I think he's one of the best writers, more accessible writers. And his book, American Fascism, the rise of the evangelical right, was ahead of its time. But the reason why he avoids people like that is because it exposes him. Even people like Chris Hedges, mind you, he was rubbing elbows with him during Occupy, but suddenly things switch up. The MSNBC money comes in, and it's different.
I mean, this is my point. Greg Carr was on panels with me and Glenn Ford. Like Greg Carr would have never said the stuff he's saying if Glenn was still here. He would. I don't even believe he would have even with his relationship with Roland Martin, he would have never come out his mouth in this way, and he would have definitely never debated Glenn Ford the way he sat down with me. Like he would never have done that. So like that's why I'm saying Greg Carr was in the room when Glenn Ford and I debated Dyson and what's his man? I forgot the other dude's name. But Carr was on our side. Carr would have never.
Yep.
That's what I'm saying. Like the change up, the switch up is crazy and it's super frustrating. And worse, it's just wrong. The analysis is wrong. Like, maybe I could feel better if it's like, man, you switched up on me, but you're right. Like your analysis is right. We don't have to be friends. But now it's like, we're not only not friends anymore, but your analysis is garbage. So it's like, there's no value anymore. Like it's like, that's what's so frustrating. Like, damn, like, we don't all have to be hanging out, but at least have a good analysis.
Yep. And you know who else they don't have on I think for the weird reason, because they didn't have him on prior to this becoming public about his transphobia, Norm Finkelstein. And I want to tell everybody, if you have not seen Dr. Jared Ball eviscerate, hand Norm Finkelstein a rope and Norm Finkelstein wrap it around himself, go check out Dr. Jared Ball's interview with Norm Finkelstein on I believe the title of the episode of the interview was "I'll Burn That Bridge When I Get There," or
something like that, because that was the title of his book, and then I might have retitled it on another. But yeah, and I will say, I didn't make it a big deal, because again, like many people, deeply appreciated Finkelstein's work. The Holocaust industry, all these other, his beef with Dershowitz. Like I was, years. Like I remember at one point I got invited to talk at DePaul, and after Finkelstein had been removed from there, and I shouted him, like I didn't even know him, but I shouted him out. I was like, I'm coming to DePaul. I was like, respect to Finkelstein, but then, I remember I was trying to set up an interview with him for something, and he told me on the phone, I'm working on this book where I'm going to be critical of these Black scholars. And I did tell him, I was like, man, I think you should stay in your lane, man. I was like, I think I said it just like that too. I was like, I didn't make it an issue. I didn't push it.
Yeah.
But I did say to him, man, I don't know if that's the lane for you. And then I didn't catch, all the transphobia, but at least in that way, although he's, unless you describe, No, that's incorrect. I should say I maybe didn't credit it enough as transphobic when I'm reading in there his hostility to letting students, have pronoun preference
Right.
and stuff like that he's writing in the book. And it's like, wow, this is a really weird turn. And then to the point of this, to the broader point of this program here,
argue again.
Yeah, sorry.
I don't have any evidence for this, but it seemed weird. I do know we follow each other on Twitter, at least used to. What's her name? The leftist Jewish woman who used to do the show with Matt Taibbi on Rolling Stone.
Oh yeah, from
actually,
Idiots.
Yeah. What's her name?
Katie Halper.
Katie Halper.
Yeah.
Like I noticed, like it seemed like a week later, she does an interview with Finkelstein and Robin Kelly and Barbara Smith. I was like, son.
Yes. Yes. I'm glad you saw that. Yes. Oh, they covered for him immediately. Well, she did. Yeah, she did.
I didn't really watch. I didn't watch. I don't think I watched more than 5-10 minutes of it. I just saw that it happened. But to the point we're making about Sam here, like, it's like, I watch enough of your shows or see enough of the clips or the thumbnails. Like, you don't talk to Black scholars. Like, now you're having Robin Kelly on. Like, all of a sudden now, Barbara Smith is super important to you. Like, what? And Finkelstein, you've never been in conversation with any of these folks. Not that I'm aware of. So it's like, this was all, I was like, that's really weird. That's really weird. So
he definitely got schooled in that, but it wasn't, he didn't get embarrassed the way you embarrassed him with just asking questions. That's the most embarrassing aspect of it. You would literally just ask him questions, and his answers, for me, demonstrated that he's a white savior through and through. He's a white savior through and through, and I had already had that feeling because after October 7th, I think, was your interview before or after October 7th?
Before.
Okay, so then it was you that put me onto it then, because right after October 7th, he was on Piers Morgan's show, I think the first time, and he said, I had given up on the Palestinians, and if I had given up on the Palestinians, it means they had no hope. And I was like, what? Like, what?
Well, he says in the Burning Bridges book, his whole exchange with the now dead Edward Said was really irritating, where he's basically saying Edward Said changed his mind and now would have seen that I'm right, that Palestinians should have a Jewish savior voice. I was like, really what I should have said, the one regret I have is I should have said to him on air, like, you need to have evidence for that claim. I don't believe you. Like, I don't believe you that Edward Said said that. I flat out don't believe it. And even if he did, then Said would have been wrong. Like he would have, with all due respect, he would have just had an error at one point in his life to say that Palestinians should sacrifice their own leading voice and their liberation in the favor of a Jewish spokesperson. I was like, and this idea now that again, kind of like what Sam, I think, was saying in a way to Glenn, Norman was saying to the rest of us, without me coming in here to tell you all about Ibram Kendi and these other Black scholars, you all wouldn't wouldn't know what to do with yourself. Yep. And, so Sam is saying, Glenn, the Black left, you need to search yourself, Glenn.
The way that, man, and it's not surprising to me that the white left, one doesn't platform you, right? That's clear as day. But the fact that they didn't, I don't know, just watch that interview when they were all obsessing over Norm Finkelstein after October 7th, they were all glorifying him, was disgusting, especially because not only is he a white savior, but I think it highlights how little he views Black studies, with the fact that when you ask him, what research did you do, right? He goes to Douglas and Du Bois, meaning he doesn't think that Black people have produced anything worth reading or analyzing since Douglas and Du Bois. And when he himself says, oh, I am the most well-read, the scholar on Gaza, more than Palestinians themselves, well, with your own logic, why the hell are you talking about this subject when you've ignored everything after Du Bois and Douglas? It's that white saviorness of saying, well, I'm intelligent enough to educate Black people on this subject, even though I'm not educating myself on the subject.
And intellectual rigor is necessary in the context of Israel and Palestine, but not in terms of Black people and struggles. No, absolutely. It was, my joke became, after October 7th, one of my inappropriate jokes was, salute to Hamas, in addition to everything else, that they got Norman Finkelstein back on track. I haven't followed it closely, but at least I've seen him not talking. The thumbnails I at least see on YouTube, he's not talking about his book anymore. He's been talking about his traditional work. So I don't know if he's not upheld a certain political line, but I was at least like, thank you, Hamas, for getting this man back. get him back focused on what he's supposed to be focused on, and get him out of this area.
No, kind of, sort of. For me, that book, I'll Burn That Bridge When I Get There, by Norman X. Finkelstein, right? Like,
that's funny.
Bro, like, that was funny. I hate when these fools are funny, but anywho, for me, that was his attempt to do the whole why I left the left kind of thing.
In the moment, I didn't get clarity on that. Later, I realized that point. I'm glad you're making it now. That was that's I think what he was like. I think he really just wanted the lane to get into why I left the left.
Yeah.
He wanted space to condemn the woke youth. He wanted to do his anti-woke thing, his pronoun hostilities. It was like, I want to do my get off my lawn thing. But he wasn't going to use his privileged and preferred, platform to, he was going to, that is of Zionism and Israel and Palestine. It was going to be, let me use Black studies, this sort of, side project to make my point. It was unfortunate. It was really disappointing. And by the way, I'm happy to be checked on this too. I'm not aware of any public criticism coming from Robin Kelly or Barbara Smith of any of the Black scholarship that Finkelstein was critical of. So I don't know what that Katie Halper discussion ended up being. But I think it's interesting. One of my thoughts was, I think it's interesting that of the Black scholars that they have access to or prefer to talk to, these folks don't have any public criticism of Black scholars at all. In fact, the only real criticism I have of, and I know you respect him, and as we all should, Gerald Horne, is that he won't be critical of other Black scholars. Like, he's said to me directly, like, I won't do it. Like, he privileges, and I understand it. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. He privileges this disengagement. And Robin Kelly said the same thing to me in so many words, years ago over our disagreement around Peniel Joseph. So I was like, you're not only, I thought, and I didn't want to give myself too much here, but I was like, you're not only trying to undermine the criticism I'm having of Finkelstein, but you're furthering the disrespect of Africana or Black studies by not even involving, for instance, as we're doing here today, the work of people like Glenn Ford, who have been for 30 years calling out the Ibram Kendis and the thises and the that. We could have had a whole, Houston Baker, Betrayal, the book Betrayal. Like, we could have had a whole discussion of legendary books that have called out these fake ass Black spokespeople. But so anyway, I just think there's so many, anyway. So that's that.
I just want to encourage everybody to go check it out, because you did honestly, like, it's weird to say he did an amazing job, because I think you just asked the right questions to allow himself to reveal what a white savior fraud he is. And the fact that this wasn't being spread around even more, just goes to show that these people just want white saviors to glorify over the actual people themselves. I mean, I know you're saying thank Hamas for putting him on the right track, but even before his attempt to grift on the whole anti-DEI, anti-woke thing, he was already against the BDS movement. He was
really,
yeah, oh yeah, Mehdi Hassan of all people had to expose him about this. Yeah, and then he was
I'm sorry.
and during the encampments, he was saying that they should stop chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, because of the connotation that it brings about the destruction of the Zionist entity and the
Oh,
white
wow.
genocide.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I think he said something like it should be from the river to the sea. What was it, like Palestinians or everyone will be free, or Palestinians
everyone will be.
right?
Oh,
yeah. Oh, he did the all life matter thing,
wow.
100%. That's how bad it gets. So I can't stand him.
Oh,
and
wow,
my favorite
that's
quote
bad.
my favorite quote of Norm Finkelstein, he got held up at the Ben Gurion airport like about 10, 12 years ago. And that's when he was denied access to the Zionist entity. And he said, quote, I am not an enemy of Israel. So that's, yeah. That's Norm Finkelstein. Yep.
All right, look, so all right, I'm getting the word. I have 40 minutes.
40 minutes.
And then I do have to, I have a definitive exit at 3:30, and maybe even a few minutes early. I think we have to be somewhere at 3:30. So I might have like, how much time is left on this?
Just
10 minutes?
10 minutes, yeah.
Yeah. I got it.
You good? All right.
Yeah.
All right, awesome.
Against that, what I'm telling you, we in the Black is Back Coalition organized in 2009 to make the kind of public statement that not all black folks had drunk the Obama laid, but we see it in the stats that still he gets overwhelming support, and that is not going to change. But you have maneuvered me into talking about what are the prospects here for the left. I do want to go back and say what Obama has actually accomplished, which is evil, is scary enough. And it is more in some fundamental ways than that which Bush accomplished, certainly, and which I think any Republican could have accomplished. So there is reason to oppose Obama based upon his actual practice and evil accomplishments. I don't know how you best, how you pull a bigger one than preventive detention, but I'm sure there are ways.
How about lying us into a war where we kill 100,000 plus civilians?
Sure, those possibilities are endless, and he's
it was just a matter of
timing,
timing,
I believe,
right.
More effectively than the Republicans are.
I mean, I guess maybe. I don't see.
It's so bad.
And by the way, Glenn is right. Posthumously, retroactively, Glenn is right that had Obama been in office in 2001, they probably wouldn't have had to lie about the war. They could have just said, hey, we're going into Iraq. Welcome. And everybody been like, yeah.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah. So yeah, and
yeah,
to your point, now genocide doesn't matter. You were mad about a war, a so-called legal war, and now, all right, yeah. All right.
No, I think the fact that he tries to, I don't know, like bypass 9/11, being basically what allowed Bush to do whatever the hell he wanted. It's like, wait, if Obama would have had, a terrorist attack, a domestic terrorist attack to that extent, are you serious? What he like you said, everything would have been go. Everything would have been go.
Yeah.
That. I for one just find it. I don't believe that Al Gore would have had us in Iraq in that way. Now, I'm not saying that Al Gore wouldn't have gotten us involved in other conflicts, but I don't see that, and maybe I'm blind to that. But at the same time,
no, we are looking right now at an offensive that is just as historically significant as 2003. In the Middle East. The war is is on. The invasion of the military penetration of Africa is on. I think that.
But do you really think that Mitt Romney is not going to pursue this? You think that Mitt Romney's
aggressiveness in the world today?
But wait a minute. But I'm sorry to cut Glenn off here, but that's not the point, Sam. The point isn't that Mitt wouldn't do it. The point is that Obama is more effective at having it done. So I mean, it's yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, that's literally the point of the article that brought this discussion about. But they can't. These liberals can't like wrap their head around it. They're like, well, Romney would have done it too. Yes, less effectively.
Less effectively and with more resistance and the need for more lies and more performance and all this other kind of stuff. Whereas Obama could just say, "Nah, man," and then again. And I know, well, I don't know. I've never seen, even in the thumbnails and headlines, Sam Cedar talking about AFRICOM, or I don't think even the African continent at all. So when Glenn mentions that, you know, you could see kind of Sam's like, oh shit, Africa. Well, who really gives a fuck about Africa? Oh my goodness. Yeah, my bad. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, you're all good.
Wild. That's wild.
I mean, that was his face. I'm glad that you noticed it.
It was in 2003. But what he does is he uses proxies. He has air wars such as with Libya, so that there aren't lots of U.S. casualties piling up. He's very, very careful not to get involved in conflicts in which there would be massive U.S. casualties. But the damage that he is doing to peace in the world and to stability is on a par with Bush 2003.
I'm not sure I agree with that assessment, but do you really think that Mitt Romney is going to do any less? I mean, do you think
that Mitt Romney will meet resistance, and he's not going to do any more?
Okay.
Look at how that is. Glenn was a monster with the direct clarity, the succinct clarity. People, look, I have no evidence, obviously, but I know while you were talking about, we're over here getting weepy at Glenn's eulogy, I know they had a toast. I know people were like, thank God I don't have to deal with this motherfucker anymore. I don't have to get emails from people like Jared about why you don't interview him. I don't have to suffer through these kinds of, you know, exchanges. I know they were like, man, thank God. And we don't have to replace him with anybody else.
Exactly. 100%. Because he's so concise, he doesn't give you any wiggle room. And yeah, man.
And it's a hard calculation for either one of us to make in that instance. And so, and when you look at something, let's say like,
I mean, he'll have stuff to build upon. He already has an Obama doctrine. If Americans aren't killed, it's not a war. He certainly will easily step into that. It's easier for Romney because Obama has
indeed. I mean, I'm not doubting that, but it's also the trajectory, I think, of this country, regardless of Obama or not. I mean, I don't think that John McCain would have made it any more difficult, frankly, for Mitt Romney, in this alternate history to attack Iran, let's say.
I think that
if we hadn't already. But
I think the rulers of the United States made their move, rolled the dice in 2003 because they felt that they had to. They looked down the line and they saw the growing isolation of the United States, and they saw the United States could not compete and only stood a chance of not being washed into the dustbin of imperial history by using its military force. And Obama's doing the same thing and for the same reason. So, yeah, in that regard, they're the same. And I think they're behaving the same.
Now I know you have to go because I know we're bumping up against time here. But let me just touch on this. What do you think of the implications in terms of the Supreme Court? Because that's also one of the big issues on my mind. Is that do you think there is a difference between the picks, Obama's picks for the Supreme Court and Romney's picks? I mean, obviously we're speculating here, but presume there are two.
Yeah. In a word, yes. Although Obama's picks are a lot less, to use the word, liberal than other Democrats' picks might be. They kind of reflect him. But yeah, there's a difference. But if that is going to be the be all and end all to it, then we will always be slaves to the Democratic Party. If it's the Supreme Court, what about the Supreme Court? If that's the the final reason, then why do we even talk about elections? If that's the only subject.
Well,
yeah, Republicans pick worse Supreme Courts than Democrats.
How does it work that if Romney wins, we are not slaves to the Democratic Party in 2016? It seems to me that we become that much more, or 2020 for that matter, we become that much more disempowered in terms of the Democratic Party.
So wait a minute.
Well,
wait a minute. Oh, this is gold. So Sam, you got your way. Obama won twice. And then all we got was a worse than Bush president in Trump, as some of us predicted. Said you're going to get Obama, and then all they're going to do is come back with something worse. And we're back with the same argument of we have to be slaves to the Democratic Party because at the end of the day, Kamala is less of a genocidaire than Trump. So this is exactly my point with the frustration with all this stuff. You had your way. Your guy won twice. And and then you got Biden in there for a few years in between, and we're still doing the same thing. Damn, I'm so glad. This has made my whole week right here.
Oh, yep, that's dope. Look at his face, though.
I mean, and then Glenn is right, and I wish I would have seen this before the debate I had with Greg Carr, because that was his argument. Kept coming back to federal judges and the Supreme Court judges. And it's like, but if that's right, I stipulate. I grant you that. Glenn is right. You're right. I give it to you. I give it to you. Republicans always pick worse Supreme Court judges. And what?
Yeah.
So what are we doing here? Oh, man.
But again, going back to Democrats giving Republicans what they want on a silver platter, they had opportunities to not just expand the court, which they've always been able to do, but to, nominate Supreme Court judges, and they're spineless. They don't fight for them. I mean, what's her discussing nickname? I'm blanking out on her name. The notorious.
RBG.
RBG, disgusting. So anti-black.
That was disgusting.
Anti-black that she was like, I'm not letting a black man replace me. That's the Democratic Party. And what happened? Croaks.
And what happens? And then dies and lets Trump in the... Absolutely.
Yep. But hey, Democrats. Oh, man.
They've always voted for the Democrat in every presidential election. And by the way, nobody, in case any of your listeners are misinterpreting, nobody here is advocating voting for Republicans. That's never the question.
But I mean, my feeling is that a vote for a third party or staying home at that point is essentially a default. If one was typically going to vote for the Democrat, would be a default half vote for Romney.
Oh.
And I'm telling you that I'm not afraid of Romney. Actually, I'm more afraid of Obama, because Obama is more effective than the Republicans, and he's more effective because we don't fight, and that's how we began the conversation.
All right. Well, I mean, fair enough. I mean, I guess my sense is that I've seen more fight from the genuine left Well, I mean, I guess the argument is that it is disempowered or co-opted, I guess, the black community, and that's and I think that's very hard to argue against. We see a black community that is suffering from unemployment in far greater numbers than whites in this country, and yet President Obama is still going to count on them to come out and if not numbers at 2008, certainly close to it.
And according to the Pew polls and subsequent polls by others, we have the crazy situation in which black folks are more about the economy, more confident about their individual place in the economy, and more confident about black folks' fortunes and prospects economy than any other group, when black folks are worse off than virtually every other group except Native Americans. So that's the kind of delusion that is descended on the community, and that's not conducive to any kind of progressive revival. I've got to go.
Yes, well, I was going to say, Glenn Ford, executive editor of the Black Agenda Report at blackagendareport.com. Thanks so much for your time. I appreciate you're giving me a couple extra minutes, and it's definitely it's. I mean, it's been a very tough question for me, and this hasn't made it any easier.
Well, and thanks for the opportunity, Sam.
All right.
And it must have gotten easier over the years. And I guess, but I guess in 2024, black people were doing just so well that none of this was relevant for anyone to consider in the last election.
Yep.
Man, rest in power to Glenn, man. That's crazy, man.
100%.
That's crazy. That
relevant today. So relevant still. That's
every single thing.
Yep.
All right. So look, on that note, I do have to go too, but listen, like I said, this made my week. That was fantastic. And I appreciate the invitation, and I will reciprocate. And we'll have to continue the discussion. I
appreciate that, Dr. Ball. And honestly, I didn't expect it to be this much fun. I'm glad that we were able to, bond over Glenn Ford schooling Sam Cedar. I couldn't ask for a better moment. So I appreciate that.
Oh, I knew it was going to be fun after I watched a little bit of your content. I was like, this is about it. You referred yourself as petty and a hater, and I was like, we're bound to be comrades. So again, salute to you and your work. I appreciate it. And I didn't get the chance to vibe with the chat as much this time, but salute to them as well. I'm sure they're undefeated as always.
I appreciate you and everybody. Please, I know everybody's coming through because I mix what I like and Black Liberation Media. But if you haven't, go subscribe to them. And if you want a brown face over here, subscribe. Let me know what you're combating anti-blackness in the brown community. It's essential. They're going to continue weaponizing it against us if we don't. So there it is. Thank you again, Dr. Jared Ball. Appreciate you. Until next time.
Peace.
Ya estuvo.